This guy is getting bullied by Truck Kun non-stop, getting regressed every time he kills the final boss. But this time, our boy says fuck you and decided to fight back by turning the final boss into his very own harem, and even adopted one of them as his own daughter. Massive crowds flooded the neon-lit streets, staring in absolute terror at an ominous purple portal. Panicked civilians lost their minds, screaming for the police, but one arrogant young man desperately reassured his terrified huzzas, claiming it was totally harmless, and foolishly attempted to snap a quick selfie with the glowing rift. A huge fatal mistake. Without warning, grotesque nightmares exploded from the void, devouring the young man alive on the spot, painting the concrete streets completely red. Shattered phones littered the pavement beneath deafening screams. In a single heartbeat, ordinary life shattered into pure, unadulterated horror. Since that cursed day, demonic purple gates violently erupted worldwide, unleashing relentless armies of bloodthirsty monsters, dark knights, and bizarre cosmic entities invading the planet. Humanity teetered dangerously on the edge of total extinction. Yujitai effortlessly dodged the fatal strike, instantly crushing him with one devastating single blow, coldly declaring that he represented the absolute law there. The shattered criminal slammed into the concrete floor with such brutal force that his consciousness instantly faded into darkness. Yujitai stared at his bare knuckles, feeling deeply irritated with himself for failing to suppress his monstrous strength during the little cop roleplay. The guy seriously needed to hold back. Later that afternoon, rumors spread like wildfire. A random colleague explained how Joe Hoshik, that rogue superhuman criminal, had been cornered inside the shopping district during a frantic pursuit and had violently snatched an innocent hostage. Staring at the comatose villain, Yujitai's nervous partner practically begged him to limit his overwhelming physical force. Unbothered, our main character brushed it off completely. Scanning the room, he noticed zero familiar faces. Honestly, he had literally abandoned this pathetic daily grind since his very first regression. The tragic reality behind abandoning his humanity stung deep, the brutal massacre of those baby dragons. These innocent mythical beings had crossed dimensions from Ascalippa, seeking joyful adventures and warm memories across Earth, only to encounter absolute heartbreaking disaster. Several had shattered their minds in endless warfare. Others crumbled beneath toxic human hatred, while some completely surrendered to despair, taking their own lives after failing their cosmic duties. Witnessing this slaughter, the ancient adult dragons unleashed pure blazing wrath, annihilating humanity and triggering an endless cycle of doomsday. Regardless of the god-tier power he had accumulated across countless tragic lifetimes, he had hit the absolute level cap. His power was boundless, but solo strength couldn't rewrite fate. Time for a totally new strategy. Just as Yogjitai prepared to leave, a female officer blocked his path, asking him out for a post-shift dinner date. She was quite adorable, but our ruthless main character instantly rejected her. He had bigger missions to run. When she asked where he was headed, our protagonist casually dropped a bombshell, announcing a sudden flight to Europe. Cut to Florence, Italy. A gorgeous green-haired girl was chilling in a sunlit park, giggling and entertaining the local kids. She crafted delicate flower crowns, radiating pure unbothered energy. Meanwhile, Yogjitai analyzed her every move from the shadows. Stepping into the light, he finally spoke up. She spun around, completely caught off guard, while Yogjitai locked dead-serious eyes on her, demanding that she follow him immediately. Quickly activating a hidden magical translation ability, the girl processed his bold command. She offered a hesitant greeting in return. When she nervously questioned his motives, Yogjitai bluntly stated that they had crucial business to handle. Bewildered, she asked if he actually knew her true identity. Yogjitai gave a cold nod, prompting an incredibly awkward, nervous giggle. Trying to play it cool, she questioned why she should follow a total stranger. She admitted the only detail she could sense was his overwhelmingly monstrous aura, proving he didn't belong in her realm. Yogjitai simply responded with heavy, deafening silence. Staring up with wide, cautious eyes, she braced herself and asked if he was there for an assassination. Our protagonist just shook his head, offering total peace. Completely mind-blown, she anxiously stuttered, asking if she was being kidnapped instead. Yogjitai shamelessly agreed that it was basically the exact same thing. She tried deflecting with humor, asking if he was some weird dragon-obsessed creep, but our overpowered main character instantly killed the joke, ordering her to drop the comedy act. His aura sharpened as he declared his absolute mission to protect her from the chaotic, broken world, warning that her stubbornness would force him to use brute strength. He subtly brought up the Green Dragon clan's legendary eyes, which easily pierced through normal illusions. He trusted her sharp survival instincts to recognize that he spoke the truth. Flashing a tiny forced smile, she asked if good behavior guaranteed 5-star VIP treatment. Yujitai casually gave his word. While accepting that escape was literally impossible, she demanded to be treated like an honored guest rather than a captured prisoner. Winking playfully, she extended her pinky to seal the deal. Yujitai noticed her violently shaking fingers, instantly realizing the truth. She was absolutely terrified of his monstrous presence. Regardless, he played along, locking pinkies to forge the ultimate promise, officially launching their chaotic new dynamic. Cut to the very next morning. The dragon girl peeked nervously around her bedroom doorframe, swimming in a massively oversized shirt, wondering if her terrifying new guardian was awake. She sleepily shuffled into the living area, only to find Yujite casually lounging inside a terrifying, swirling storm of dark aura. Panicking slightly, she called his name. Completely unfazed, Yujite coldly commanded the writhing shadows, assuring her that everything would go completely smoothly as long as his absolute orders were followed. Suddenly, the pitch-black mist transformed into a flawless, identical clone. This was his double S-rank ability, the Grand Duke's Shadow. The summoned entity deeply bowed to its mighty master, brushing right past the completely paralyzed girl. Her jaw dropped, realizing this terrifying phantom looked exactly 100% identical to Yujite himself. Breaking the tension, he told her to relax, explaining that his shadow double was handling the daily grind. Then he casually asked about her sleep, finally realizing this overpowered individual was permanently sticking around instead of actually clocking in. He explained that since the clone used his raw power, he was technically on the clock. His true mission now was acting as her ultimate personal bodyguard. Chuckling nervously, she nodded along. She cautiously took a seat. Desperate to diffuse the heavy, intimidating atmosphere, she pitched the idea of a shared breakfast feast, but our stoic hero claimed that human sustenance was completely unnecessary. Refusing his rejection, she complained that dining solo was way too depressing, while her overpowered roommate literally just stared at the wall. Raising an eyebrow, Yujite questioned her intense obsession with human meals, reminding her that mythical dragons didn't require earthly calories. Swinging her legs happily, she flashed a bright, pure, innocent smile, explaining that cooking wasn't about survival, it was about the absolute joy and vibrant energy of sharing flavors. But out of nowhere, she leaped off the couch, declaring their empty kitchen totally unacceptable. She demanded an epic grocery run to prove the magic of a real morning feast. Yujite tried resisting the side quest, but his protests hit a brick wall. Flash forward, the duo pulled up to a massive, bustling supermarket, eyes glued to them instantly. She radiated stunning, otherworldly beauty while Yujite carried massive main character energy. Even random girls were whispering about his insane visuals. Totally oblivious, the green dragon joyfully skipped through the aisles, humming sweet tunes while Yujite trailed behind with his signature deadpan expression. He suddenly realized she was stockpiling ingredients like a literal apocalypse was coming. Questioning whether this mountain of food was truly just for breakfast, she quickly defended her selections, arguing their barren kitchen needed a total revamp, ensuring they had premium supplies for all their future cooking sessions. Her eyes sparkled with culinary excitement, but Yujite completely crushed her dreams. He ordered her to dump the endless grocery bags at home so they could just grab takeout instead. Before she could even celebrate dodging dish duty, he dropped a sudden serious side mission that left her entirely speechless. She looked visibly deflated, but he stood firm. They had crucial, destiny-altering business to handle, and absolutely zero time to waste. Their next destination, a sketchy underground alley. She scanned the shadows until a cyborg-eyed old man stepped from the gloom, smirking and asking whether he had brought his girlfriend along. Yujite instantly issued a freezing threat, growling at the old man to shut his mouth and simply do his job before he lost his remaining eye as well. Moments later, she emerged, clutching a brand new identification card, staring at the plastic like it was legendary loot. Eyes sparkling, she whispered that it was her very first. Yujite was genuinely stunned, wondering how she had even survived in the modern world, without an identity or a bank account. As she inspected the card, she noticed her newly forged name, U-Bomb. Her curiosity immediately piqued, and she asked why he had chosen the name U-Bomb, especially since he had even given her his own family name. Yujite casually gestured toward a faded Four Seasons storefront, explaining the simple reasoning behind it. Since there were 4 dragons, he figured they might as well be named after the 4 seasons. U-Bomb meant spring, making it the perfect name for the spring dragon. Her face instantly lit up as she declared that she absolutely loved it, explaining that spring symbolized blooming life and pure joy. The beautiful new name completely won her over. As they strolled down the street, she openly admitted that she was no longer afraid of him. Yet despite those heartfelt words, her dragon vision still revealed the terrifying pitch-black aura surrounding him, a constant reminder of his deadly nature. Even so, she flashed a bright, radiant smile and firmly declared that he wasn't a villain. Yujite silently scoffed, wondering how she could possibly judge someone's soul after knowing them for only a single day. Overflowing with confidence, the girl proudly insisted that her green dragon intuition was never wrong. Our protagonist suddenly froze. She was giving him a genuine, completely unfiltered smile, a sight he had never witnessed throughout any of his countless brutal regressions. He honestly couldn't tell whether this shift in the timeline was a blessing or a curse. Still, as they continued walking side by side, a quiet thought crossed his mind. Maybe this fresh start wasn't so bad after all. Meanwhile, somewhere in Africa, a crimson-haired demon stood triumphantly over the broken, bloodied remains of a fighter she had utterly dismantled. The arrogant fool had spent the entire battle boasting about his overwhelming strength, yet he hadn't even managed to survive 60 seconds. Without the slightest hint of mercy, she slammed her heavy combat boot directly onto his screaming face. One final devastating kick echoed through the battlefield, and the screaming came to an abrupt end. Judging by the impact, she had probably shattered half the bones in his body. A wicked laugh escaped her lips as she mocked his lifeless form, joking that maybe her punches had been just a little too heavy. Wearing a sinister skull mask, She reveled in the explosive rush of adrenaline coursing through her veins. Tonight marked her 99th flawless victory without a single defeat, an undefeated streak she found absolutely hilarious. Now, the only thing she wanted to know was who her next victim would be. By the following morning, news outlets around the world were in complete chaos. Massive turf wars were ripping South Africa apart as a radical syndicate known as Barkata unleashed a series of bomb attacks. Rumors spread like wildfire about a savage monster called the Night Fighter, who had allegedly declared war on the South African Union, throwing the entire region into turmoil. From his office, Ujite quietly analyzed the reports, his sharp gaze confirming that the moment he had been waiting for had finally arrived. Just then, Yudubam, the green-haired girl, gently knocked on his office door and cheerfully announced that dinner was ready. Letting out a quiet sigh, Ujite decided to join her at the table. The moment he arrived, she proudly presented what could only be described as a culinary disaster straight out of a horror movie. Whole fish had been stuffed into strange purple rice, their lifeless bodies sticking out like reanimated zombies, as she eagerly waited for his reaction. Bursting with pride, she explained that the bizarre creation had been inspired by a British dish she had seen, except she had combined it with rice because obviously Koreans needed their daily serving of it. Unfortunately, the fish's lifeless eyes looked like they were desperately begging for mercy, and Ujite's pale expression said everything. His soul was practically leaving his body. Nevertheless, as he painfully forced down the cursed meal, Ujite casually dropped a bombshell, revealing that he would be flying out tomorrow to capture the Red Dragon. Ujibom's cheerful expression instantly darkened. She urgently warned him that the mission would turn into a complete bloodbath. Unlike her, the Red Dragon was her absolute opposite, a living nightmare to tame, who would never simply sit down and listen. Ujite calmly asked Ubom to come with him and help negotiate, but she immediately flinched, explaining that rival dragon clans never worked together. Our protagonist raised an eyebrow as he learned that their instincts fundamentally clashed with one another. Ubom explained that her nature revolved around peaceful growth, while the entire Red Dragon clan practically worshipped brutal combat, raw violence, and constantly asserting their dominance. She desperately pleaded with him to understand that forcing the Red Dragon into a corner would trigger an absolute catastrophe. To dragons like them, surrender was a fate far worse than death. Ujite calmly countered that elite hunters were already closing in on the Red Dragon, and delaying any longer would guarantee her execution. Looking Ubom straight in the eyes, he explained that bringing the Green Dragon along was their only chance to prevent a complete massacre. Ubom's eyes widened in genuine shock. She had always believed this lone wolf of a man would rather shoulder every burden himself than ever ask someone else for help. Her surprise slowly melted into a warm, supportive smile as she agreed without hesitation, unable to bear the thought of watching another dragon perish. There was, however, one important condition. Fixing him with a deadly serious stare, Ubom demanded that Ujite finish every last bite of her terrifying dinner before they discussed anything else. Her sharp eyes hadn't missed him quietly lowering his spoon the very moment he brought up tomorrow's mission. Ujite froze, realizing this dragon was far more observant than he had expected. In the end, the poor man forced himself to swallow the radioactive-looking sludge while silently crying inside. Somehow, surviving this meal felt even more difficult than fighting an entire horde of dragons by himself. The scene suddenly shifted back to Africa, revealing a ruined city that looked as though it had been completely wiped off the map. A sea of corpses covered the battlefield, while the crimson-haired girl stood proudly in the middle of the carnage. Looking down at the fallen, she scoffed at their pathetic strength. Even after securing her 200th consecutive victory, she felt nothing but disappointment, frustrated that the entire African continent couldn't produce a single worthy opponent. Bored beyond belief, she even considered traveling to Europe just to hunt down the Green Dragon. Only a few yards away, two surviving soldiers hid behind shattered rubble, their voices trembling uncontrollably. They whispered in horror about how a single bloodthirsty girl had annihilated their entire elite squad. One of them desperately prayed for their legendary savior to arrive before it was too late. In the blink of an eye, the crimson-haired demon suddenly appeared right above them, laughing at their hopeless attempt to hide. She unleashed a lightning-fast strike, but just before the fatal blow could land, a brilliant surge of golden aura violently intercepted her attack. The overwhelming force blasted her backward in surprise. As she deflected the massive impact, an earth-shattering explosion erupted across the battlefield. The terrified soldiers watched in complete disbelief that someone had actually survived her attack. As the smoke slowly cleared, a towering knight clad in heavy armor stepped forward. His piercing gaze locked onto the crimson-haired girl as he calmly asked if she was the infamous Night Slayer. The surviving soldiers immediately erupted into cheers. Their ultimate savior, Javier Karma, had finally arrived. As the African Union's 8th-ranked powerhouse, he radiated an overwhelming golden aura while calmly ordering his battered troops to evacuate the wounded without delay. Smirking beneath her skull mask, the crimson-haired girl mockingly called him an old-timer, complimented the sheer power behind his attack, and instantly realized she had finally found the true final boss. Javier carefully observed his opponent, genuinely surprised that someone so petite was hiding beneath such a terrifying mask. Lowering her chipped blade, she arrogantly joked that her enemies always became so captivated by her beautiful face that they completely forgot how to fight. Completely baffled by her reckless confidence, Javier questioned why she refused to surrender despite the overwhelming gap in their strength. The crimson-haired fighter merely burst into maniacal laughter, declaring that she would rather die with her weapon in hand than ever bow her head to anyone. Tightening her grip around her battered blade, she prepared herself for war. Pushing her agility to its absolute limit, she unleashed a relentless barrage of strikes against his steel-plated armor. Suddenly, a fatal opening ignited her excitement. Without hesitation, she ruthlessly aimed a crippling blow at his blind spot, hoping to finish the fight in a single strike. But the moment her attack landed, Javier remained completely unfazed. He absorbed the impact without budging even a single inch. Pure unfiltered shock froze her expression. What kind of indestructible monster was this guy? The armored juggernaut glared down at the red dragon, coldly remarking that she had clearly spent her entire life crushing nothing but weaklings. He warned her that her little playground massacres ended here, because he had absolutely no intention of holding back. Brilliant golden energy flared within his eyes as he acknowledged her natural talent, only to mercilessly declare that it wasn't nearly enough to survive against him. Without another word, Javier hoisted his colossal broadsword and unleashed his overwhelming aura, forcing the panicked girl into a desperate razor-thin dodge. In the very next heartbeat, he activated his devastating ultimate technique, Blade of Raw Ignition. Every instinct within the red dragon screamed in terror. Dodging was mathematically impossible. Crossing her arms to reinforce her defenses, she was struck head-on by a blinding shockwave of apocalyptic light that violently launched her across the battlefield, smashing her through a massive stone wall. Debris rained from every direction as enormous clouds of dust swallowed the battlefield whole, burying her beneath the catastrophic wreckage. Standing completely untouched amid the destruction, Javier silently admitted that the masked girl was an absolute monster. Somehow, she had reinforced her arm enough to withstand his ultimate technique. Realizing that even his strongest attack hadn't finished her, he concluded that he would have to raise his killing intent even further. As the heavy smoke slowly dispersed, Javier carefully inspected the shattered crater. A strange sense of unease crept over him. Had she somehow managed to escape? Though the truth was far more surprising. U-Bomb, the enigmatic green dragon, had been perfectly concealing herself behind the shattered rubble. She tightly held the feral red dragon in place, covering her mouth to keep her silent. Red stared back in complete disbelief, utterly stunned by her sudden appearance. U-Bomb quietly explained that she had rushed over to save her from certain death, but Red immediately rejected the rescue. She angrily argued that the green dragon possessed virtually no combat ability, making her completely useless on a battlefield like this. Dropping her usual gentle demeanor, U-Bomb firmly warned that continuing the fight would guarantee Red's death. Red slapped away the healing magic surrounding her shattered arm and stubbornly declared that she would finish this battle even if it cost her life, ordering U-Bomb to stay out of it. In an instant, U-Bomb's expression turned frighteningly serious. Looking Red directly in the eyes, she coldly explained that her death would trigger a disaster that affected far more than just herself. As glowing green magic flowed into Red's broken arm, U-Bomb reminded her that survival wasn't a battle anyone fought alone. If the red dragon died here, the sanctuary that dragons had built on Earth would eventually collapse, leaving every dragon child without a home. Then just as suddenly, U-Bomb returned to her usual sweet and cheerful personality, pouting as she admitted that she genuinely wanted to keep living peacefully on Earth. All she asked for was a little cooperation. Red fell silent. For the first time, she fully acknowledged the overwhelming gap between herself and the Golden Knight. Escaping alive seemed statistically impossible, yet U-Bomb simply flashed a confident smile and assured her that their dependable old man would take care of everything. Red's eyes widened in disbelief the moment she heard that someone else was coming. Beaming brightly, U-Bomb revealed that she hadn't entered the war zone alone. Right on cue, Yujitai calmly stepped onto the devastated battlefield. Javier slowly turned to face the mysterious newcomer, carefully assessing the threat standing before him. Radiating an eerie calmness, Yujitai introduced himself as the crimson-haired girl's official guardian. Javier immediately burst into mocking laughter, claiming that someone as scrawny as Yujitai couldn't possibly protect anyone. Meanwhile, hidden behind the broken rubble, Red cautiously peeked over the debris, quietly asking if this was the legendary human U-Bomb had been talking about. U-Bomb immediately shoved her back into hiding, warning that the battlefield was about to become far more dangerous. Remaining perfectly composed, Yujitai calmly explained that the situation was far more complicated than Javier believed. Walking away now would be the wisest decision, but Javier's pride refused to allow it. He angrily declared that the crimson-haired girl had crossed the line and demanded justice. Yujitai calmly responded that her hands were free of innocent blood. That single statement only fueled Javier's fury even further. He snarled at Yujitai to stop twisting the facts. Still, Yujitai continued pushing for a peaceful resolution, promising that the girl would disappear without leaving a trace if Javier simply stood down. But the stubborn knight finally snapped. Roaring across the battlefield, he declared that this was African Union territory. As a sworn investigator, he vowed to place both of them in chains. Blinding golden energy erupted from his sword as he activated his combat arts, unleashing a devastating slash powerful enough to erase everything in its path. The resulting shockwave kicked up an enormous dust storm that swallowed the battlefield whole. Javier smirked through the swirling debris, mockingly declaring that if Yujite truly intended to protect her, dying so pathetically was a disappointing way to do it. Then came the twist. Yujite silently materialized directly behind him, completely untouched and radiating a terrifying pitch-black killing intent. Letting out a quiet sigh, he almost sounded disappointed as he mocked the supposedly elite rank 8 warrior for being so painfully rigid. Javier instinctively spun around, his mind completely frozen by Yujite's impossible, almost godlike speed. Before he could even begin a counterattack, Yujite instantly closed the distance and cleanly severed the hand holding his sword. Then he slowly approached, radiating an overwhelming aura of death, and quietly ordered Javier to listen carefully, because his nightmare was only just beginning. With chilling composure, Yujite narrated the story that would become Javier's official report. As a righteous investigator, Javier had bravely attempted to capture the Crimson Dragon, only to encounter an unidentified beast. Unable to avoid its first devastating strike, he lost both of his arms and his eyesight before the mysterious creature disappeared without a trace. Javier screamed in desperation, begging for mercy, but Yujite felt absolutely none. He completed the script with a single blood-soaked slash, severing Javier's remaining arm and permanently destroying his vision. In his mind, the Union's elite healers would eventually save the knight's life. However, the terror carved into his soul would never heal. To Yujite, psychological domination was the greatest form of control. He quietly smiled to himself, knowing that even the notoriously violent Red Dragon, the legendary night fighter, would instinctively submit to overwhelming fear. Meanwhile, Red stood completely frozen in horror, trembling uncontrollably. She quietly asked Yujidam what kind of demonic being Yujite really was. Yujidam simply maintained her usual calm demeanor and casually corrected her. He wasn't a monster. Red stared at her in complete disbelief before scoffing. If that psychopath counted as human, then she might as well be an ordinary lizard. Honestly, after witnessing everything that had just happened, it was hard to blame her for thinking that way. A moment later, Yujite calmly approached the Red Dragon and laid down the rules. From this day forward, she would live under his roof and remain under his protection. He promised to give her plenty of freedom and reliable support whenever she needed it. Then, in an instant, his expression turned ice cold, his eyes sinking into a terrifying abyss as he quietly warned that the moment she crossed his boundaries, she would experience unimaginable suffering. The mighty dragon girl immediately began trembling like a leaf, instinctively preparing to run for her life. Before she could panic any further, Yubom quickly stepped between them, easing the suffocating killing intent while reassuring her that everything would make sense soon. Red, meanwhile, was completely losing her mind, internally screaming as she tried to process the absurdly terrifying situation she had just walked into. Yubom shot a secretive wink at the protagonist, treating the trauma like an inside joke. Their leader officially dubbed the redhead Yu-Yuriam, symbolizing summer, ordered her to burn the moment into her memory, then casually strolled off, fully expecting the two of them to follow. Bom leaned in, teasing Uriam about finally showing some character growth since their last chaotic encounter. Uriam snapped back, insisting this was no time for jokes. Meanwhile, Yujite's shadow clone quietly signaled that its mission was complete. Thousands of miles away in the Amazon rainforest, the real Yujite was relaxing with a stunning blonde whose looks belonged on a high-fashion runway. He severed the mental link to his double, privately congratulating himself on the flawless execution. He reasoned that sending Bom instead of appearing himself had been the smart move, since Uriam was too unpredictable for him to persuade alone. The blonde caught him muttering to himself and teased him for talking to his smartwatch like a lunatic. Then came the twist. She was the fabled Golden Dragon, a diva who craved the spotlight and had dazzled everyone across 3 reincarnations. Ironically, her most radiant moment had triggered catastrophic devastation, and the endless adoration that followed had grown suffocating, driving her into this jungle exile. Though she'd originally come down purely for entertainment, she was idly fiddling with Jite's smartwatch when he bluntly asked why she'd chosen isolation among wild beasts instead of mingling with humans if amusement was what she wanted. The question caught her off guard. Startled by how much he knew, she asked how he'd learned so much, and he explained that Bom, the illustrious green dragon, had already told him her secrets. He then asked whether humans truly frightened her. She paused before admitting that fear wasn't really the issue. Being among mortals just brought endless chaos. The constant staring and being chased around made daily life exhausting, so escaping the grid had made perfect sense to her. A comfortable silence settled between them, before Jite randomly asked if she liked pastries. She stared at him, bewildered, scoffing that divine dragons needed no sustenance. He simply summoned a spatial pouch with a wave of magic, instantly filling the jungle with the mouth-watering scent of fresh bread. The moment it hit her, she surrendered completely, her eyes widening into sparkling saucers as she gazed at the mountain of donuts and tarts, asking where he'd gotten such a haul. Seizing the opening, he offered her a home, one far more comfortable than surviving in the wild, promising her safety and endless time to play with the others. She hesitated, recalling her mother's old warning about trusting strangers, but the moment he mentioned unlimited macarons, her defenses collapsed and she agreed on the spot. Meanwhile, back in the city, Yeriam leaned against the balcony rail as autumn leaves drifted past, wearing a bitter scowl and muttering about her earlier clash with the protagonist while Bom watched quietly from inside. Jite then walked in with the barefoot blonde girl, who loudly declared her devotion to the sausage bread from the local bakery, insisting it beat anything from their home realm, and practically melted while eating a macaron, praising its crisp shell and chewy center. Bomb greeted Jite warmly, and the blonde lit up with joy at seeing her, sprinting over for a crushing hug and crying that she'd missed her terribly while gushing about how much more beautiful Bomb had become. She asked if Bomb had been living here alone with the mister. Bomb explained that she herself had only recently arrived, gesturing toward the sulking redhead nearby. Off to the side, the protagonist quietly dismissed his shadow clone, praising its work before releasing the spell. Urium glared from the doorway, locking eyes with him in a tense, silent standoff before turning away. The blonde spotted her and dashed over, shrieking her name with excitement, then wrinkled her nose at the smell of smoke and mocked the Red Dragon clan's habits. Urium clamped a hand over her mouth, threatening to yank her hair out if she kept talking, proof that her temper hadn't mellowed one bit. Gathering the three of them in the living room, the protagonist asked their real ages. Bomb said she was 20. The blonde proudly claimed she was 10, while Bomb revealed that Urium was actually 15. Urium slumped, looking utterly checked out. The blonde defended herself, arguing that dragons aged far faster than humans, so no one should treat her like a child. Urium shot back, mocking the very traits the blonde was so proud of. The blonde then asked why everyone called the redhead Urium, wondering if it was some kind of alias. Urium brushed the question off, so Bomb explained that their master had assigned each of them these names. When told she would receive a title of her own, the blonde recoiled in horror, insisting it was wrong to hand out permanent names before someone reached adulthood, since true names carried real power. Still, she quickly worked out that her own role would represent Autumn. The protagonist nodded, confirming the decision and formally giving her the title. Then his gaze fell on her pendant, and he ordered that once the creature inside it hatched, it should be named for Winter. Her jaw dropped. How could a mortal see through her illusion? He explained that he'd sensed the polymorph blue dragon egg hidden inside her necklace, and told her to guard it carefully, since it would hatch soon. Stunned by how much he knew, she pressed him for answers, but he brushed her off, saying it was above her pay grade. His tone then turned serious as he laid down one absolute rule: they were free to enjoy life in the human world, but they were never to step outside the boundary of his sight. Urium hated the restriction and called him a dictator, while the other two exchanged uneasy glances. Still, she held her ground and dared them to argue. Eventually, the three of them accepted the terms. While ever the peacemaker, Bomb suggested they go shopping for human IDs and supplies for their new life. The blonde was thrilled, though Urium sarcastically asked how they'd pay for it, joking that robbery sounded like a fun alternative. Unbothered, the protagonist handed Bomb a premium black card and told them to spend freely and enjoy being human for once. Stunned, Bomb asked what the actual limit was, and he told her there wasn't one. The three of them proceeded to clear out an entire mall, piling their carts with designer goods without a hint of restraint, while Jite's smartwatch buzzed non-stop with transaction alerts totaling tens of millions. Back at the penthouse, they were buried under shopping bags. Urium proudly showed off a newly forged blade, looking triumphant. The blonde twirled happily in her new outfit, while Bomb sheepishly returned the card, admitting she felt guilty about spending so much and trying to gift him some streetwear, only for the card to finally decline. He brushed off her concern. The blonde then demanded attention, showing off her haul and grabbing a shirt she said matched his style, asking if they could do a matching look. He complimented her outfit, and she melted with happiness. Meanwhile, Urium admired the gleam of her weapon, boasting about replacing her shattered sword and clearly fishing for praise. He asked if it matched her aura, considering she only hunted top-tier artifacts, then gave an approving nod. She scoffed that it barely met her standards, true to her usual icy demeanor. The blonde then rushed over with an armful of clothes, begging Urium to model some of the outfits she'd bought her. Urium flatly refused, snapping that she wasn't playing big sister. Bomb quietly told the protagonist that Urium was simply bad at showing affection and was secretly grateful underneath it all. He noticed that Bomb hadn't bought anything for herself and asked her about it. She gestured to a small sprout sitting on the counter, explaining that caring for living things brought her peace, and that watching flowers bloom created memories that lasted forever. Then a heavier thought crossed her mind, and she asked how they were supposed to find real happiness inside the safe little world he'd built for them. Good food and games were nice, but their souls still craved purpose. He promised he had a plan, then set down a set of academy registration papers, inviting them to experience real student life. The revelation left both Urium and the blonde stunned. Sometime later, the three of them dragged themselves home from a grueling day at the academy, completely drained. The blonde trembled with anxiety, quietly confessing to Urium her fear of being the one who failed while her sisters succeeded. Urium, already irritated, told her sharply to be quiet, but the blonde gave her a pleading, teary look, crying that she was terrified of failing simply because she wanted too much. Thankfully, the usually cold protagonist stepped in and gently praised their hard work, trying to calm the tension. Yet Yugail completely broke down, sobbing hysterically that she definitely bombed the Lair Academy entrance exam. Yugail Bomb questioned his mysterious absence, and he casually mentioned he'd gone to grab a secret package. He revealed a warm box radiating a heavenly scent. Pure magic, honestly. Yugail's eyes instantly sparkled, and she desperately begged to know if it was fresh pastries, but Jute promised a vastly superior feast. His mind flashed back to her idle days when the superstar dragon had been asked about her ultimate craving. The interviewer had playfully joked that she survived purely on mystical morning dew, but Yugayul had laughed it off, insisting she had mortal tastes. She'd intensely pondered her ultimate snack, and then boom, crispy fried chicken and iced soda materialized. The dragon squad stared with wide, hungry eyes, like they'd discovered a divine artifact. Uraim immediately started roasting Yugayul mercilessly, mocking her for looking absolutely clueless about fried chicken and exposing her fake television persona along with her supposedly favorite earthly meal. Yugayul fiercely ignored the shade and instantly declared crispy chicken her new eternal obsession. Meanwhile, Jite quietly attempted a stealthy exit, trying to let the dragons devour their holy feast in peace, but Bomb blocked his escape with big emotional eyes, begging him to stay, radiating desperate hope for family bonding. But our lone wolf calmly turned her down. Refusing defeat, Yugayul Bomb unleashed her ultimate adorable pout to win him over, basically pleading for his company. Yet his iron will held strong. Stepping outside, a sudden phone vibration shattered the chilly silence. The caller ID flashed the prestigious Lair Academy. A formal voice sharply demanded to verify his legal guardianship over the three girls, and our main character smoothly confirmed his status. However, the official quickly dropped a massive, unexpected problem regarding the recent entrance exams. He stood deeply puzzled, since U-Bomb had never mentioned any red flags. Then the Academy official dropped an absolute nuke. U-Bomb had utterly demolished the interview with a flawless, perfect score. The examiners had been so completely mesmerized that they wanted her to lead as a student representative and deliver the legendary opening ceremony oath. The Academy was so wildly obsessed that they begged her instantly, but our quiet girl fiercely rejected them, flatly turning down the massive spotlight. Now the desperate administration begged Jite to change her mind, terrified of losing a generational talent. Our main character brushed off the idea instantly, firing back that manipulating U-Bomb was out of the question, since he fiercely respected her personal choices. Conversation over. But right as he ended the call, a shadowy presence loomed. Uriam swaggered up, hair blazing wild and puffing smoke like an absolute boss. She demanded to know who he'd been talking to and whether Green was involved. His expression darkened into a heavy scowl, and he sternly ordered her to use U-Bomb's actual name. Rolling her eyes hard, Uriam trashed the name completely, calling it utterly cringe and asking if they were running some pathetic pretend family. Her intense gaze suddenly locked onto him, probing for his ultimate endgame. She demanded the real reason he'd dragged them all to Lear Academy. Our stoic hero replied coldly that he simply wanted them to pursue absolute freedom. Flashing her signature savage grin, Uriam declared her thirst for battle, desperately needing to know if this academy housed any formidable monsters. Jite confirmed that the absolute top-tier elites gathered there. Uriam merely scoffed, dismissing them as arrogant toddlers, but our main character fired back a reality check, reminding her that she currently counted as one too. Instantly triggered, she shattered the balcony rail, daring him to a death match, craving a taste of his true power and scoffing at his attempts to tame her. Yet Jite just glared back, icy and unfazed, telling her to go eat some chicken. That absolute disrespect sent Uriam spiraling. She cursed, flipped him the bird, and stormed off furious. While she raged, Gayul sprinted over carrying crispy fried gold, desperately trying to pacify the dragon by shoving food toward her face. Uriam prepared to unleash pure fury, but one accidental bite changed everything. Holy wow, that crispy perfection instantly rebooted her entire hostile aura. The heavenly flavor completely stunned her. Honestly, that meal carried mythical healing stats. But anyway, let's shift focus back to Lear. This academy was absolutely insane. A massive floating continent named Hatling casually orbiting the globe like a majestic sky fortress. Lear stood as the ultimate sanctuary for awakened youth, prodigies blessed with mind-bending supernatural abilities. Truthfully though, elite bloodlines and filthy rich heirs dominated the ranks. The ordinary masses harbored deep resentment, labeling it a glorified sandbox for the wealthy. Meanwhile, down on the campus grounds, Yugayul and U-Bomb explored the breathtaking scenery. Yugayul was entirely starstruck, whispering that commoners could never breach these walls. She genuinely suspected Jite hid an unfathomable secret billionaire status, given his habit of casually dropping insane cash. Bomb agreed it made perfect sense, noting his undeniable elite aura. Bouncing with pure joy, Yugayul hyped up their flawless admission success and completely obsessed over how incredibly sleek their uniforms looked. Suddenly, it hit her. Where had Uriam and Jite vanished to? U-Bomb clarified that Uriam had headed toward the Blue Dragon sector for combat trials, and that Jite had escorted her as her official guardian. These superhuman prodigies wielded catastrophic power but severely lacked basic human common sense, so guild veterans or family elders mandatorily shadowed them to prevent absolute campus-wide destruction. Yugayul totally agreed, especially regarding Uriam, because honestly unleashing that walking disaster unsupervised was basically asking for a massive catastrophe. Bomb nodded along, explaining how Uriam's brutal exam focused entirely on crushing rival students in duels. Hyped beyond belief, Yugayul desperately wanted front-row seats. Sadly, U-Bomb shattered her dreams, revealing that spectators were strictly banned. Absolutely devastated, Yuge-hu questioned this ridiculous rule, and Yubom casually explained that their combined presence would definitely trigger an uncontrollable public meltdown. Glancing around, the entire courtyard was literally staring at them. Everyone wondered where these stunning, otherworldly goddesses had suddenly descended from. Gossip spread like wildfire among the elites, mesmerized by their breathtaking beauty and incredibly mysterious, untouchable energy. These disguised dragon royals instantly became legendary icons on day one. Suddenly, the perspective shifted to Azure Dragon Academy's Chengchun Arena, where pure absolute chaos reigned supreme inside the battleground. Awakened rookies clashed violently with wooden blades, the roaring audience radiating energy like a massive high-stakes tournament. Jitai observed with a deadpan, chilling gaze. This pathetic brawl meant nothing to him. Nearby, a furious instructor screamed at his students to strike harder. Then a creepy, long-haired professor flashed a sinister smirk, ordering everyone to chill out and prioritize the fragile mental health of these young warriors. This mysterious figure approached their group, revealing himself as Wei Yan, the highly esteemed supreme professor ruling the Blue Dragon faction, and smoothly expressed his profound honor to collaborate with the Guardians. Nearby, adults completely fangirled, worshipping his legendary status. Yet Jite remained completely cold and unfazed. Spectators continued hyping up this elite professor, leaking rumors that he wielded immense wealth alongside a legendary war hero background. Booming through the speakers, the announcer's massive voice demanded combatants number 124 and number 7 enter the fray. Our main character narrowed his predatory gaze while Uriam dragged her wooden blade into the arena, radiating absolute god-tier boredom. She coldly muttered that if this fight sucked, she was abandoning this pathetic school for good. Locking her piercing glare onto a blonde rival, she silently prayed for a real challenge. The audience erupted, debating who would survive, Sophia or the redhead. One spectator totally simps for the fiery redhead, but his buddy snapped him back to reality, arguing the real hype was about survival, not looks. He bet everything on Sophia securing the victory, considering her hardcore background in the elite Royal military forces long before she'd ever set foot on campus. The Uriel was Russia's apex airborne hunter unit, notoriously feared for subjecting their recruits to absolute hellish torture. Down by the cage, a hulking giant went completely feral, screaming at his girl to obliterate her opponent, broadcasting his massive, suffocating expectations to the entire roaring stadium. Sophia just stood there frozen, practically begging the earth to swallow her whole from the sheer, agonizing cringe. Her opponent, Yeriam, an absolute menace who thrived on psychological warfare, caught the vibe and immediately launched into vicious trash talk, mocking the giant's unhinged screaming and turning the disrespect up to maximum. She suggested the little princess should just forfeit and go cry in daddy's arms, sneering the words daddy's girl with a highly punchable, totally toxic smirk. Instantly, Sophia's entire demeanor shattered. She locked a death glare onto Yeriam and hissed with freezing malice for her to shut her filthy mouth immediately, promising the redhead that one more word would guarantee her a body bag. Pure, unadulterated murder blazed wildly in her eyes. But honestly, Yeriam was feeding off the chaos. She just flashed a psychotic grin, practically begging Sophia to strike. The spectators instantly tasted the heavy, suffocating bloodlust, murmuring that this lethal aura was classic Royal Hunter energy. Though they had to admit, Yoriam radiated absolute boss energy too. The atmosphere shifted into pure, terrifying anticipation for the upcoming slaughter. The buzzer blared. Sophia launched like a fired missile. They violently collided, but Yoriam effortlessly deflected the explosive opening strike, dropping a cocky remark about her decent velocity. Then, shifting her weight flawlessly, she unleashed a devastating counterattack, whipping her weapon around and roaring for her to come eat this strike. But Sophia refused to flinch. She blitzed back in, executing a blindingly fast combo that Yoriam barely parried, tearing her outfit in the process. Yoriam completely lost her mind over it. That outfit had been brand new. Sophia showed zero mercy, relentlessly hacking away, hunting Yoriam across the arena in brutal, breathless close-quarters combat. The stadium went totally feral as explosive shockwaves echoed endlessly. Sophia launched a sweeping low kick, but Yoriam defied gravity, vaulted off the iron cage like a ninja, and plummeted like a meteor with her blade locked onto her skull. Sophia desperately raised her guard, but the catastrophic impact violently shattered her defense, and a pathetic whimper escaped her lips. Smelling blood, Yoriam went totally goblin mode, unleashing a flurry of strikes that forced a terrified Sophia into a desperate, crumbling retreat. Then, like a phantom, she vanished behind her and whispered that Sophia only felt powerful because she'd been holding back. Then she initiated absolute annihilation, delivering devastating combos until Sophia crumpled lifelessly onto the cold, hard canvas, violently coughing up crimson. Paralyzed, Sophia lay there as Yoriam towered over her, blade aimed at her throat, while the referee declared candidate 124 the undeniable champion. Yoriam chuckled darkly, dismissing her fake gangster energy as pure pathetic weakness. That specific insult ignited Sophia's deepest rage. This crimson-haired menace was a masterclass troll at baiting aggro. Sophia's guardian sprinted toward the carnage, screaming her name. The audience immediately started buzzing, roasting the so-called elite hunter for getting absolutely folded, marveling at the total massacre. Despite the initial hype, the stadium worshipped Yoriam's flawless victory, pointing out she'd practically dodged every single scratch, treating a trained killer like a helpless toy. The brutal disrespect continued, with rumors spreading that Sophia had only passed admissions through pretty privilege instead of actual combat talent. Simultaneously, a frantic field medic sprinted over and enveloped Sophia in a vibrant emerald healing aura. Yet Sophia remained frozen, her face completely shadowed, bangs obscuring her dead eyes, absorbing the toxic whispers that labeled her a pathetic, easily shattered glass cannon. The medic grimly informed the Guardian that Sophia had suffered shattered arms and would need serious recovery time. Trembling violently, Sophia desperately insisted she was completely fine. Her guardian stepped in to soften the blow, flashing a heartbroken smile and gently reassuring her that she'd fought bravely against an impossible god-tier opponent. He told her he felt zero disappointment, hoping this crushing tragedy would forge her into an unstoppable force. Later on, he offered some deep philosophical wisdom about leveling up through bitter, agonizing failure. Mid-sentence, the panicked medic shrieked in absolute terror, pointing at his daughter as she stalked back toward Uriam. Out of the void, Sophia manifested a wicked dagger. With an unnerving demonic whisper, she declared that this wasn't a surrender, just a tactical retreat. Pure unhinged insanity had fractured her pupils. Her mind was completely gone. Sophia shrieked like a lunatic, demanding to know where she thought she was running. This death match was far from over. Something inside Sophia had completely shattered. Meanwhile, Uriam casually walked away, convinced the war had ended. Leaping forward with pure killing intent, she plunged a blade right into her back. Meanwhile, our main character just watched from above, cold and silent. He didn't even blink. Down below, absolute fury consumed Uriam's eyes as reality hit her. Spitting venomous curses, she raged that she couldn't believe a literal child had just backstabbed her like some coward. Screaming bloody murder, Sophia charged like an absolute psycho, and the entire arena instantly exploded into chaos. Panic swept through the stands as teachers and students watched a simple sparring match mutate into a gruesome crime scene. The truth clicked. If this crazy girl wanted a literal fight to the death, Uriam would happily oblige. Her hand clamped down on Sophia's hair, ripping a sheer wail of agony from her lungs. Playtime was officially over. A brutal right hook instantly shattered the girl's arrogant face. But she wasn't done. The merciless beatdown continued, crimson splattering across the arena floor with every strike. The entire student body watched in pure paralyzed horror, minds reeling, wondering why the hell no one was stepping in. Gathering her aura, Uriam unleashed one final devastating blow. The impact instantly knocked Sophia into a bloody, unconscious heap. Uriam stood above her, gasping for breath, yet her savage glare remained fixed on the broken body. It was not over. Snatching the dropped blade, she advanced, hellfire burning in her eyes. She promised to repay that treacherous strike tenfold. But right before she claimed her bloody vengeance, Sophia's father crashed into the arena, intercepting her wrist. He roared at her to stand down, claiming the debt was already paid. Professor Waiyan finally snapped into action, barking urgent orders and commanding the Academy mages to deploy a spatial restriction spell. He declared an immediate suspension of the exam, and blinding azure mana erupted, trapping everyone within a suffocating magical lockdown. Seems like this brat got the bias on her side. Uriam was absolutely furious. She screamed at the hypocrisy of it all. Why was she the villain when that brat had cowardly stabbed her first? She spat out the facts. With that massive guy's aura level, he could have easily subdued his own daughter peacefully. Absolute facts right there. Playing the peacemaker, Waiyan instructed the giant to tend to his bleeding child. Then shifting his gaze to Uriam, he flashed a chillingly calm smile and claimed staff were already retrieving her guardian. She just needed to wait and heal. But Uriam viciously bit back. Silence was not an option when her blood was literally boiling. Dropping his friendly facade, Waiyan whispered that he had witnessed everything, playing the sympathetic card, yet warned that if her rampage continued, his protection would completely vanish. A dark warning lingered in his words. Her entire bloodline would suffer the consequences. He casually dropped a sinister hint about her hidden sister, and that froze Uriam dead in her tracks. But the actual hell did this creep know? Waiyan cornered her with a straight-up threat. Keep pushing and everyone she loved would become a target. Safety would become a myth. Flashing a twisted, knowing smirk, he ordered her to wait for her guardian. This professor is pure garbage, but suddenly the main character arrived like an absolute boss, commanding Waiyan to cancel the search. Her guardian had arrived. Without breaking a sweat, Jitai phased right through the ultimate magical barrier, shattering the spell like thin air. He demanded that the professor step away from the wounded girl and deal with him instead. Uriam stood there, stunned but visibly relieved. Meanwhile, Waiyan was absolutely paralyzed. How could a total nobody with zero backing casually shatter a master-level barrier? Cut to the principal's office, where two guardians sat in pure tension. Waiyan played it cool, pouring fancy tea, but internally he was sweating bullets. Jitai radiated monstrous strength, yet this mysterious Yu family did not even exist on his radar. A background check was definitely needed later. Forcing a pathetic, nervous laugh, Waiyan opened the meeting with a hollow apology for the arena bloodbath, quickly spinning the narrative. The good news, he said, was that there were no fatal casualties. Sophia was currently inside the healing ward, while Uriam had already fully recovered. He shamelessly proposed sweeping the entire mess under the rug. They were Academy classmates after all, and promised to erase the incident records if both parties simply shook hands. Sophia's massive father Mikhailov sat like a stone mountain, eyes closed in total silence. Finally, he confessed that his bloodline had instigated the violent clash and offered the first apology. Presenting himself as Sophia's protector, he blamed the brutal ambush on pure youthful recklessness, claiming she had simply lost control of her mana. But Jite remained an absolute statue. Piercing Mikhailov with a dead, freezing glare, he outright rejected this proxy apology. The culprit herself needed to beg for forgiveness. Mikhailov's aura instantly erupted. He called Jite an arrogant fool, asking if he was acting tough because he was blind to Mikhailov's underworld connections. Jite literally did not care. Taking a slow, calm sip of tea, he smoothly asked whether this pathetic display was considered an apology in Mikhailov's homeland. Mikhailov snapped, surging to his feet with blazing fury and roaring, demanding to know if the main character expected him to violently drag Sophia here to apologize. Jite instantly replied with a deadpan yes. Savage, the killing intent in that room was suffocating. Watching two titans clash, Wuyong completely panicked. Flashing an anxious smile, he desperately tried to defuse the bomb. But Jite laid down the law. He was not here for empty words. He demanded to know why Mikhailov had just stood there when Sophia lunged with that blade. Mikhailov barked back that the ambush had simply been too fast. Jite ripped into that pathetic alibi, coldly asking if hiding behind a child while failing his actual duty didn't completely crush his pride. That shattered Mikhailov's patience. He slammed his foot down, snatched Jite's collar and growled a bone-chilling threat. Lethal blue aura exploded from him as he dared Jite to cross the mighty I-Rail organization in this insignificant little country, projecting fake alpha energy and trashing the Yu family as though they were absolute nobodies. Suddenly, a deadly blade was aimed right at him, and pure panic washed over his face. Where the hell did this weapon come from? Jite casually praised the edge of Mikhailov's own weapon, warning that a single twitch could easily paint the room red. Mikhailov completely froze, his eyes dropping as he realized Jite was effortlessly wielding his signature dagger, the exact weapon he always kept concealed. Shock widened his eyes. How did this absolute nobody swipe his concealed weapon without making a single sound? Jite simply mocked his sloppy sheath, claiming it made the theft a total joke. But the math wasn't adding up. Mikhailov's spiritual awareness was absolutely maxed out. Yet in the blink of an eye, our main character materialized right behind his back, dropping a terrifying whisper straight into his ear. It was a deadly promise that would make any sane person completely shatter. He casually warned Mikhailov to stay out of dark alleyways, sounding exactly like an unhinged apex predator claiming its prey. Then he effortlessly tossed the blade onto the desk, declared their little chat finished, and turned to walk away. Mikhailov remained paralyzed, pure terror etched into his pale features. Meanwhile, Waiyan, who had been sweating out an ocean of anxiety, finally exhaled a massive sigh of relief, looking like a man who had just barely escaped a catastrophic death. Stepping out into the hall, Jite spotted Yoriam leaning against the wall and immediately checked if she was holding up okay. Unbothered, Yoriam brushed it off as a mere scratch, loudly flexing the unbreakable pride of the Red Dragon clan. Classic Yoriam energy right there. Our guy gave a simple nod of approval, but her tough facade suddenly crumbled away. She paused, pouting slightly, and quietly asked if she had totally wrecked the situation, heavily blaming herself for dragging them into this chaotic mess. Frustration and guilt completely flooded her. She realized she should have kept her cool like an actual adult instead of going totally feral. But our main character shut that down instantly. With a deadpan stare, he told her she had handled it perfectly, leaving her totally stunned. Then, matching his signature frosty vibe, he offered some absolutely unhinged advice. The next time someone tried testing her boundaries, she should just finish the job completely out of sight. That was insanely dark, but Yoriam was absolutely eating it up. A devilish smirk flashed across her face as she dared him not to regret those words. Jite, absolutely unfazed, promised he never would. Changing gears completely, he ordered her to pack her bags. Back at the house, a confused Yoriam questioned their sudden relocation plan. He revealed they were transferring to the Lair Academy dorms. Yoriam dramatically rolled her eyes, joking that the tiny yellow chick would probably lose her mind over this. Suddenly, a voice called out for Jite, making both of them snap their attention backward to find Waiyan approaching with his signature unsettling smile. Begging for one more chat, Jite coldly stated their business was already finished. But Waiyan desperately insisted he had a crucial proposal involving Yoriam. But Waiyan quickly clarified he was actually bringing a massively profitable deal to the table. Shooting his shot, he offered her the ultimate throne as the official freshman representative at the prestigious Blue Dragon Academy, painting an absolute fantasy, endless scholarship funds, top-tier magical artifacts, massive media hype, basically the royal treatment. Our guy, sensing massive red flags, sharply questioned whether Waiyan even held enough authority to guarantee such an insane package alone. Waiyan just flashed a slimy grin, bragging about his incredibly tight connection with the powerful vice principal Namjoon. The moment that name dropped, Jite's expression shifted into an empty, terrifying darkness, and the tension in the air instantly skyrocketed. Deep in his mind, our main character was processing absolute horrors. Both Waiyan and Namjoon were actually literal demonic humans. Unlike superhumans who embrace divine blessings, these monsters consume pure void. They willingly traded their fragile humanity for overwhelming, corrupting power, morphing into bloodthirsty beasts driven only by pure slaughter. These creatures were the rotting core of the world's deepest tragedies, and Jite had suffered devastating losses because of their kind during his grueling first and second lives. Honestly, his fists itched to violently crush Wei Yan every single time they locked eyes, but he forced down his lethal rage, resolving that Wei Yan deserved unimaginable suffering before tasting death. Masking his bloodlust, he smoothly stated that only Uriam's opinion actually mattered. After all, he was merely acting as her guardian. Wei Yan chuckled in agreement, playfully noting that her destiny was entirely in her own hands. Locking eyes with her, he aggressively hyped up the position, detailing the massive evolution happening within the Academy's walls, and pushing his vision of her ruling as the absolute leader during the massive year-end festival. Grasping her hand, he pleaded to forge destiny together, yet Uriam remained absolutely frozen and bluntly rejected his offer without hesitation. Leon stood paralyzed, convinced his hearing had failed. Her expression stayed ruthlessly blank as she doubled down. Pivoting toward Jitai, she casually suggested packing up. Leon completely snapped, desperately demanding why she had even attended the trials just to reject him. Uriam merely shrugged, confessing her room felt painfully boring, so she craved a chaotic brawl. Thick veins bulged across Leon's forehead. Verging on a total meltdown, he deployed his final trump card, gesturing outside to reveal a massive swarm of journalists hungering for his official statement regarding the brutal stabbing. He viciously blackmailed her, declaring her entire academy future rested upon his upcoming words. Choose wisely. Unfazed, Uriam spun around, delivered a final rejection, and strutted out with absolute main character energy. Glaring daggers, Leon hissed a dark warning about future regrets. Our savage queen didn't even flinch. She abandoned him utterly crushed. Now that is peak entertainment. Stepping outside, Uriam's cover was instantly blown. The moment she emerged, ravenous journalists ambushed her like starving predators, violently thrusting flashing cameras forward. One interviewer aggressively interrogated her regarding Sophia's recent bloodbath, demanding immediate answers. Another ruthlessly shoved a microphone closer, claiming the leaked footage had the entire nation spiraling into madness. They viciously questioned whether she had orchestrated this carnage purely for clout and clan revival, pressing her for her true motives for infiltrating the prestigious Blue Dragon Academy. Murderous rage flashed in Uriam's eyes, yet before she exploded, our protagonist intervened, ordering the swarm back and demanding they leave a wounded student alone. Uriam instantly silenced him, claiming the spotlight for herself. Snatching the device from a stunned reporter, she boldly echoed their question, radiating pure, unadulterated confidence. Flashing a downright demonic smirk at the blinding lenses, she broadcasted her ultimate unfiltered desire, openly demanding the S-word. Damn, this menace possesses zero filter. The frame suddenly shifted toward breathtaking cherry blossoms, drifting gracefully across a ridiculously luxurious estate. Welcome to their elite academy dorm. Yugail absolutely lost her mind, shrieking like a glorious jackpot winner. Stepping inside the massive lounge area, sheer disbelief washed over her at the insane architectural drip. Even the stoic Uriam stood stunned, openly questioning if this majestic palace was truly their home. Yugail wasted 0 seconds, sprinting up the grand staircase to aggressively claim the ultimate master suite. Naturally, Uriam bolted behind her, roaring for dominance. Yugail struck absolute gold, discovering a colossal sanctuary bathed in golden sunlight, featuring a king-size mattress and a cinematic screen. She admired her prize and proudly declared this paradise hers. Suddenly, Uriam smashed through the doorway, a cigarette hanging loosely from her lips. Claiming the scenic balcony offered prime smoking territory, Uriam hijacked the suite. Panic instantly gripped Yugail, who frantically protested her first-place victory, pointing out that Uriam had previously wanted the adjacent suite. But Uriam unleashed a death glare, and Yugail instantly crumbled under the pressure, meekly accepting the neighboring quarters without another squeak. Trust me, nobody survives challenging that crimson menace. Meanwhile, Yugail surfaced inside a completely different chamber, delicately misting a massive sapphire egg while whispering sweet motherly praises and caressing its magical shell. The protagonist entered and questioned the indoor rainstorm. Flashing a warm smile, Yugail called it vital prenatal education, since oceanic dragons crave moisture. She happily lectured about mystical incubation, revealing that as it neared its hatching phase, the polymorph illusion would shatter, restoring its monstrous true scale. Pivoting, she mentioned the Academy's reigning gossip, Uriam. Jite instantly projected the viral interview footage, showcasing Uriam absolutely obliterating the journalism squad. They chuckled through the chaotic comment section. Several users worshipped her fearless, unhinged aura, while haters continuously trolled her. Suddenly, that scandalous S-word declaration blasted across the digital display. Panicking, Yubom desperately shielded the egg's non-existent ears, protecting her unborn child from such vulgar toxicity. That hilarious energy was destroying everyone watching. Later, the squad gathered inside the lavish central lounge. Lounging with her signature icy demeanor, Uriam groaned about society overreacting to basic biological facts. Blinking in utter innocence, a deeply confused Yugail questioned the mysterious vocabulary. Uriam slowly turned, a wickedly corrupt grin spreading across her face as she offered forbidden knowledge, declaring it was officially time for some mature education. Pure terror flashed across Yuge-Yul's face as she begged to be spared from this forbidden knowledge, desperately claiming her mom had warned her against such secrets. But Urium just crept closer, flashing a truly demonic smirk. Escaping was not an option. Jizmabi literally grabbed Yuge-Yul's head, whispering absolute nonsense. She frantically wailed at Jite, begging him to rescue her from this utter madness. Honestly, bless her soul. Meanwhile, Jite and Yubom completely ignored these chaotic dragon siblings. Flash forward to the crack of dawn. Urium was utterly passed out. Suddenly, Yuge-Yul busted down the door, shrieking about a massive emergency. Urium woke up, radiating pure rage, cursing and demanding what on earth justified this rude awakening after her sleepless night. Yuge-Yul instantly accused her of binge-watching sketchy content again. Urium just flashed a wicked smirk, proudly confessing her spicy late-night marathon. That made Yuge-Yul totally snap. She aggressively dragged Urium downstairs, shouting that playtime was officially over. Urium lethally threatened murder if this was fake news. Downstairs, the whole squad was assembled. While Urium looked entirely unbothered, she demanded answers. Yubom crouched beside the massive egg, her voice trembling with insane tension as she announced Uriel's imminent awakening. Everyone stared as the shell fractured with a blinding magical glow, making Yuge-Yul squeal loudly. A majestic new life was literally entering the world. But right then, our guy's expression completely shattered. Devastating flashbacks hit him like a truck. The last birth he had witnessed was an absolute nightmare, far from joyful. His trauma dragged him back to a bleeding battlefield, where a sobbing mother had begged for her infant's survival. But his comrade delivered the crushing truth. It was too late. The newborn perished instantly, the hospital reduced to ashes and the world literally burning around them. They had been utterly powerless. Our main character carried this soul-crushing weight in his eyes, agonizing over that tragic fate. Snapping back to reality, he stood paralyzed beside the three girls, questioning why this traumatic ghost had resurfaced today. As anticipation peaked, the shell completely shattered. A tiny blue claw emerged, followed by an adorable baby dragon, boasting giant, innocent eyes. Her cuteness level was straight-up lethal. Yubon radiated pure joy, softly welcoming the newborn miracle into the world. Yuge-Yul's eyes practically sparkled with stars. She was totally malfunctioning from happiness as the little dragon adorably rubbed her sleepy eyes. Meet Gyul, whose name literally translates to winter. As Yubom tenderly toweled her off, Jite questioned where she had mastered such delicate care. Yubom casually mentioned her own mother had done this too, except using her tongue. She then softly offered him a chance to cradle the baby dragon, but he silently declined. Instantly, Yuge-Yul hyped up and aggressively begged to hold the tiny creature. Yubom cautiously transferred the baby, strictly warning Yuge-Yul to handle her with extreme care, since her scales were super fragile. So incredibly soft, Yuge-Yul vowed to protect the tiny creature, embracing her fiercely. Closing her eyes, she declared passionately that this absolute warmth was healing her very soul. But suddenly, a mischievous, chaotic glint flashed across Yuge-Yul's golden eyes as she challenged Urium to hold baby Gyul. Before the fiery girl could even process it, the tiny dragon was shoved right into her personal space. Urium completely panicked, but Yubom calmly ordered her to chill out and show some gentleness. Meanwhile, the little hatchling let out an adorable yawn, completely unbothered. The usually explosive Urium was now frozen, awkwardly holding the squirming little dragon, staring down in absolute stunned silence. Yuge-Yul flashed a triumphant smirk, asking if the hothead finally understood the sheer, overwhelming joy of cuddling their youngest sister. Urium desperately tried maintaining her tough facade but reluctantly muttered that the tiny kid was undeniably adorable. Then she whipped around toward our main character, aggressively demanding to know why he was acting so suspiciously distant when everyone else had taken a turn. Yuge-Yul chimed in, whining that little Gyuri would be heartbroken if Jite rejected her. Yet our guy remained standing there, an impenetrable fortress of silence. A wicked demonic grin spread across Urium's face as she mercilessly mocked his untouchable lone wolf act, accusing him of behaving like some superior being. Suddenly, she threatened to launch the baby dragon right at his face, forcing his hand. Yuge-Yul shrieked in absolute terror, screaming and asking if her sister had actually lost her mind. Urium's smile morphed into pure chaotic evil as she boldly declared that her single ultimate mission since moving into this house was shattering Jite's unbreakable composure. Without hesitating, this absolute menace actually tossed the helpless little Jite high into the air as Yuge-Yul wailed in absolute panic. But Jite didn't even flinch. Moving like lightning, he snatched the baby dragon single-handedly, radiating absolute dominance. Urium groaned in massive disappointment at his zero reaction, while a traumatized Yuge-Yul mumbled that her older sister was totally unhinged. Yubom glided over with a proud, gentle smile, suggesting that he might as well shower the baby with some affection since she was already securely in his arms. Looking uncharacteristically nervous, our hero hesitantly extended a single finger, delicately stroking her head while awkwardly asking if he was doing it right. Gyul beamed with pure joy, and Yuge-Yul immediately began rapidly snapping smartwatch photos, declaring this legendary, heartwarming moment had to be immortalized. Suddenly, Yu Gaijil proposed an epic family photo to celebrate Jill's awakening, magically producing a vibrant red rose and leaving Yu Gaijil utterly speechless. Yu Gaijil offered a playful wink, revealing she had prepared special props for this exact aesthetic, shocking everyone with her intense dedication. She confidently tucked the rose behind Jitae's ear, then placed a delicate blue blossom on Jill. Jitae stood completely paralyzed, his soul seemingly leaving his body, as Yuriam erupted into hysterical laughter at his absolutely absurd appearance. But Yu Gaijil, beamed with measly, assured him he looked dashing, prompting our desperate protagonist to beg them to just snap the picture and end his suffering. Yuriam furiously tried escaping the frame, whining about the cringe, but Yu Gaijil ruthlessly dragged her right back into the spotlight. This honestly feels like a found family. Once the legendary photo was taken, our guide Joel turned toward Yu Gaijil, questioning her next plan with Jill. Yu Gaijil revealed her grand plan, teaching the baby polymorph through a mystical magic transfer. This advanced technique channels pure mana into another soul to instantly grant them a spell, but it comes with a heavy toll. It literally burns away the caster's own lifespan. Yolmos J. Yu Gaijil Bomb remained absolutely unshakable in her resolve. Mature dragons like her, Yoram and Yu Gaijil, had already mastered disguising their true terrifying forms back in their home dimension. But little Jill was completely defenseless. Lifting the hatchling with boundless affection, Yu Gaijil softly whispered that dragons mature at terrifying speeds, and she desperately wanted to gift Jill fragments of pure happiness and unforgettable memories before she outgrew these precious family bonds. Our main character gave a firm nod, pledging his absolute support. Instantly, Yu Gaijil's eyes turned pleading as she softly asked if he could anchor her during this dangerous magic transfer. Jitae offered a single decisive nod, but Yulbam playfully scolded him for standing far away like a soulless statue, demanding he close the distance. With absolute deadpan seriousness, he claimed there was zero logical reason to sit that intimately, but Yulbam relentlessly pushed her case. She dramatically argued that the massive mana drain could make her collapse and drop poor Gale, adding that the guilt of the baby getting hurt would crush her. She was pouring on the theatrical drama, but Jitae just pierced her with his unbreakable poker face. Defeated at last, our stoic main character surrendered, taking a seat beside her while sighing that resistance was completely futile. The instant their shoulders brushed, Yulbam felt his rock-solid physique. Blushing furiously, she nervously whispered how hard it was. Confused, Jitae questioned her, causing Yulbam to panic and desperately stammer that she meant the sofa's texture, totally backpedaling from the massive misunderstanding. Unfazed, our guy seriously analyzed the expensive sofa materials, missing the social cue entirely. Desperate to shift gears, Yulbam immediately sparked her mana, a brilliant emerald aura erupting around her and the tiny hatchling. With a deep breath, she initiated the perilous magic transfer sequence. Fast forward through the aftermath, a few peaceful days rolled by since that intense magical awakening. Yulbam's energy hit absolute rock bottom. She practically melted into the couch cushions, completely drained, with literal steam radiating off her overheated body, whispering faintly that the agonizing task was over. Looming above her, our main character quietly acknowledged her massive effort, and a breathless thank you escaped her lips. Attempting to stand, her legs completely betrayed her, leaving her staggering like the walking dead. She pleaded with our guy to feed tiny Gale and handle burping duty during her power nap, strictly warning him to snap her awake if any absolute chaos erupted. Suddenly, her vision blurred, and her exhausted body just entirely gave out. With lightning reflexes, our main character snatched her mid-fall, cradling her collapsing frame effortlessly, defying gravity like it was absolutely nothing. Utterly stone-faced, he announced he was hauling her to bed. Instantly, Yulbam's cheeks flared a deep crimson, her panicked eyes darting everywhere. Scooping her up in a smooth bridal carry, Yulbam meekly confessed through her blush that being hauled around like royalty was intensely humiliating. Meeting her gaze, he playfully jabbed that she somehow retained enough stamina to whine. Yulbam breathed out a weak giggle and questioned if her weight was crushing him, definitely fishing for reassurance. Without skipping a single microsecond, our protagonist declared she was practically weightless. That unexpected sweet talk clearly melted Yulbam's heart. Gently depositing her onto the mattress, he wrapped her tightly, and within seconds, Yulbam plunged straight into a coma-like slumber. Moving like a ghost, our main character silently sealed the bedroom door shut. The moment his boots hit the hallway, intense waves of bizarre sapphire mana started pulsing violently out of the living area. His danger sense spiked, and he investigated immediately, only to be blinded by a violent glowing azure aura consuming the entire space. As the blinding flash faded, a tiny kid rocking waist-length turquoise hair perched on the couch, examining her own palms like they were some legendary alien artifact. Jide froze for a heartbeat, desperately attempting to project a warm, welcoming dad vibe. Yet his underlying anxiety was screaming loud and clear. This was officially an unprecedented disaster. Before that could even be processed, the scene cut to the Lair District Precinct, where a squad of detectives were gossiping relentlessly about our main character's recent god-tier performance. He was single-handedly dismantling entire criminal syndicates in mere days, effortlessly cracking cold cases the supernatural task force couldn't solve in months. A wildly overhyped colleague cornered him, aggressively offering an expensive dinner celebration since our guy was officially the golden boy of the precinct. A female officer brutally roasted him, cackling that he was just exploiting the corporate credit card. Desperately defending his shattered ego, the veteran claimed he fully intended to fund the after-party himself. Disregarding their noise, our boy simply shook them off with a firm headshake, muttering that duty called elsewhere. The rejected coworker sulked hard, flexing his shiny gold card like it could somehow hide the sting of rejection. Stalking our boy to the exit, the squad furiously whispered about his suspicious habit of vanishing perfectly on the clock. Their paranoia spiked, and they became completely convinced he was hiding a secret lover. With just one brutally icy glare, he instantly murdered their delusions, still holding on to absolute zero emotion while strutting away. One detective desperately hollered that he believed in him, swearing the girlfriend rumors were fake. Meanwhile, that female cop was, no doubt about it, definitely catching major feelings. Cut to after hours, and here comes the massive plot twist. That desk jockey actually wasn't the real protagonist at all. Turns out that exhausted wage slave was secretly the Archduke of Shadow, an insanely overpowered ability Jite had violently ripped from a slaughtered demon lord back in the day. This dark doppelganger basically acted as his personal butler, grinding side quests while the real boss chilled. Strolling into the local park, the shadow clone locked onto its creator and approached with ultimate reverence, addressing him as absolute master and humbly reporting for summoned duty. Suddenly, the phantom registered a massive anomaly. Its terrifying overlord was cradling a tiny human child, radiating maximum chill. Jite casually revealed that this was Gyo, rocking a fresh haircut and finally unlocking her epic human transformation ability. A random pedestrian beamed at the duo, gushing over the insanely adorable, peaceful toddler and complimenting how perfectly they meshed as a whole family unit. Desperate to prove its worth, the shadowy servant volunteered to carry the child if the boss felt burdened, but that offer did not land well. Instantly, Gyo locked eyes with the phantom with absolute murderous intent, radiating pure hostility, and the ancient dark entity internally panicked in pure terror. Rejecting the assist, Jite carefully placed Gyo on the pavement, explaining that she needed to walk independently. The trembling shadow just awkwardly monitored her, severely questioning its entire immortal existence. The darkness nervously asked why the supreme leader was playing nanny, and why the older girls Yubom, Yerum, or Yugayul weren't covering childcare duties. Yugayul, Jite sighed, was currently bedridden, burning up after enduring the intense mana synchronization. As for those other two walking disasters, he recalled the absolute madness. Yugayul was dragging her sister out on a massive shopping spree, yapping non-stop like a broken radio, while the delinquent Yerum angrily blew smoke rings, completely isolating herself. Our boy realized those two were entirely incapable of surviving basic responsibility, and the shadow bobbed its head as the puzzle pieces finally clicked. Cutting the small talk, our main character demanded the actual reason for this little summon, piercing the phantom with an intimidating glare and silently threatening it to drop the act, since their souls were literally tethered together. The dark entity nervously averted its ghostly eyes, frantically insisting it wasn't protesting, just deeply bewildered by this modern existence. Historically, its previous demonic overlords only demanded horrific bloodshed, slaughtering empires and spreading despair, yet here it was, stuck grinding a mundane 9-to-5 desk job, feeling entirely out of place. Adapting to human life was brutal for a shadow beast. It bowed, begging forgiveness for any disrespect, but the main character simply brushed it off, reassuring it that craving a normal existence was perfectly natural for any sentient being harboring true desires. A massive operation loomed on the horizon, and until then, his absolute command was simple: play the perfect undercover employee and fade into the background. Before vanishing, he mentioned the human detectives were totally crushed by the Shadow's recent rejection, and his final directive was to hit the bar and grab drinks with the squad, since its departure was fast approaching. The dark beast bowed deeply, swearing to execute the command perfectly, and vanished into the night to carry out its orders. Once alone, his gaze drifted toward a mother-daughter duo radiating absolute joy. The little girl beamed brightly, squeezing a brand new toy while praising her mom, and he caught little Gariel totally locked onto that exact heartwarming moment, her eyes completely glued to them. It hit him instantly. The quiet girl desperately craved a plushie of her own. Regret washed over him. Had he only realized sooner, he would have bought one immediately. But Gariel kept piercing the scene with such intense longing that her silent yearning felt deafening, and he felt it straight in his soul. Best breaking the silence, he softly asked if she wanted a toy, and Gariel's pupils dilated massively, absolutely stunned that he'd cracked her inner thoughts. Skipping the whole mall thing entirely, he simply raised his hand and ripped a tear through the fabric of space. Yep, just casually spawning a dimensional rift. From the void, he yanked out a massive azure teddy bear, mentioning it wasn't an exact match to her other plushie, but definitely a solid upgrade. Gariel embraced the stuffed animal, and holy smokes, the thing practically dwarfed her tiny frame. A rosy flush painted her cheeks, and the pure bashful joy radiating from her as she stared at the giant bear was absolutely melt-inducing. He asked if she loved it, fully anticipating an adorable nod or a quick squeeze. Instead, she surprisingly dropped the colossal plushie right onto the pavement. Closing the distance with tiny, deliberate steps, she marched straight toward him, leaving our boy completely baffled and frozen in confusion. What on earth was triggering this? Was she secretly furious? Or did the present completely flop? Panic spiking, he swiftly scooped her tiny body into his arms, wondering in a spiral of paranoia if the blue bear had fallen short of her expectations, and he gently confessed that his inventory of magical presents was empty. But Gao simply extended a tiny hand, softly grazing his cheek, before pressing her small forehead directly against his. The sudden intimacy completely paralyzed him. What on earth sparked this bizarre reaction? His mind raced, theorizing she might be confusing standard mana transference with actual human displays of affection, or maybe this was just her silent, clumsy way of showing deep appreciation. Instantly, trauma hijacked his thoughts. Flashbacks of apocalyptic wars, oceans of blood, and ruthless death matches against monstrous dragons flooded his vision, and centuries of endless slaughter threatened to drown him. The suffocating nightmares gripped his soul until Gyoro's pure, untainted gaze forcibly anchored him back to reality. Her absolute innocence instantly extinguished his inner demons, coaxing out a rare, genuine smile from the hardened regressor. The tiny girl beamed in response, and hand in hand they strolled beneath a breathtaking sunset, giving off the ultimate wholesome found family aesthetic, with Gyoro dragging her gigantic azure bear along the pavement. Just as the cuteness overload peaked, he abruptly hit the brakes, exhaling sharply as his senses flared. His radar had locked onto a familiar presence. Bursting into view, Yugail sprinted toward them, waving frantically like an absolute maniac, radiating golden retriever energy, and engulfed Gaio in a massive bear hug, enthusiastically announcing she just raided the local shopping district. Tapping her forehead against the toddlers, Yugail smugly translated that the little one was floating on cloud nine over her brand-new plushy present. His jaw practically dropped. Was this girl secretly telepathic? Busting out laughing, Yugail revealed that their dragon biology let them transmit pure emotions and vivid thoughts through simple skin contact, completely bypassing the need for mana, and that the forehead-to-forehead connection was their ultimate communication hotspot. The truth struck like lightning. Gaio's forehead gesture was never some weird magic glitch, but a pure declaration of affection. He'd been completely clueless, and Yugail mercilessly roasted his ignorance, a well-deserved reality check for the veteran. Suddenly his eyes locked onto a massive, suspicious case slung over her shoulder. When interrogated about the loot, she flashed $1 million smirk, unzipped the bag, and revealed a pristine acoustic guitar, calling it her new emotional outlet, a perfect way to bypass physical contact. Striking a rock star pose, she eagerly asked if she radiated major pop idol vibes, and without missing a beat, she started shredding chords and belting out lyrics right there on the sidewalk. With fiery determination, she vowed to master this musical path completely. As her melody echoed, he spiraled back into a traumatic timeline. A haunting vision materialized, a shattered guitar, scattered medical supplies, terrifying needles. Amidst the wreckage sat a hollowed-out Yugail, hands stained crimson, surrounded by discarded liquor bottles. It was a suffocating, nightmarish reality he violently hated. Snapping back, he watched her aggressively pressing the strings, her skin tearing with actual smoke rising from the fierce friction on her fingertips. Her dedication was bordering on sheer madness. Catching the aggressive tremors shaking her hand, he immediately ordered her to dial it back and stop torturing herself. Yugail blinked in absolute surprise at his unexpected concern and questioned his reaction, but he simply commanded her to pace her ambitions. Guiding Griel forward, he heard Yugail call out passionately, declaring her unstoppable drive to reach the pinnacle of success. Dodging the emotional moment, he instantly pivoted, demanding an update on Yugail's bomb's condition. Yugail's bright expression darkened into sadness as she shook her head, explaining that the girl was still trapped in a feverish slumber, a severe backlash from burning massive mana reserves. Shifting topics, he asked about Uraim, making Yugail tap her chin in deep thought. Uraim had spent the entire day locked in her room, hopelessly addicted to binge-watching dramas. Honestly, our main character considered that an absolute win. Way better to have her obsessing over screens than starting street brawls outside. Fair enough, that fiery redhead possesses way too much chaotic energy. Upon returning home, Jite reminded Yugail to wash up, and she happily agreed, bringing Joe along. But while Yugail wondered aloud if Yubam had woken up, the atmosphere suddenly turned ice cold. Our main character gripped her shoulder hard, his relaxed aura vanishing in a split second, and his eyes turned deadly serious as he ordered Yugail to grab Joel and lock themselves in their room, strictly forbidding them from stepping out. His terrifyingly intense tone completely freaked Yugail out, and she asked what was wrong, but he simply growled that she should leave now. Trembling with fear, she frantically nodded and dragged Joel down the hall. Our main character stepped forward and slowly pushed Yubam's door open, his expression instantly darkening into pure rage. Heavily armored knights swarmed the entire room, their menacing eyes glowing through the darkness as they surrounded the sleeping Yubam. One armored figure turned coldly, demanding if our main character was responsible for the Green Dragon's current state. These absolutely were not your average goons. They were the elite guardians, elite knights, and bound slaves serving as the dragon's ultimate personal bodyguards. terrifying monsters and humans eternally bound by overwhelmingly powerful magic to serve dragonkind, with a few even top-tier elites exclusively assigned to protect baby dragons during their earthly joyrides. Instantly, our boy realized these knights had absolutely cast a forced sleep spell on her, but before he could utter a single word, the armored giant aggressively stomped forward, furiously demanding what our main character had done to the green dragon. Obviously, Jite was not about to tolerate this disrespect. He instantly fired back, harshly scolding the intruder for trespassing into a private home without even dropping a basic introduction, essentially asking whether the man had ever heard of basic manners. But the arrogant knight just laughed off the warning, acting totally supreme, claiming that interrogations were a privilege reserved strictly for the strong, and calling our main character pathetically weak. Then just to flex his power, the intruder unleashed a suffocating dark aura known as Black Heart, shifting the room's atmosphere from merely tense to absolutely blood-curdling. The armored menace essentially declared himself the only one with the right to ask questions, trashing our boy as a filthy lowly human. Big yikes, truly dead meat energy. Yet somehow Jite remained ice cold. The knight issued one final threat, aggressively demanding the truth about the green dragon. Instead of panicking, our main character kept his chill and smoothly laid out the actual facts. A blue dragon had just hatched, leaving the green dragon completely exhausted from teaching the newborn how to master polymorph magic and performing a massive mana transfer. This revelation only made the towering knight glare with heavier murderous intent, viciously demanding to know who our main character thought he was. Standing his ground like an absolute boss, Jite simply responded with chilling confidence, declaring himself their true guardian. The armored giant burst into mocking laughter, completely baffled that a fragile human would ever dream of protecting legendary dragons, relentlessly mocking our boy and questioning if he truly grasped the terrifying nature of these cosmic beings. But Jite just narrowed his sharp eyes, stating he knew exactly what these creatures were capable of, which was exactly why he had his own interrogation for the intruders. Then our boy dropped an absolute bombshell, demanding to know why they'd appeared so early when they were destined to be hopelessly scattered across a distant dimensional rift. The invading squad stood completely paralyzed, exchanging shocked glances, utterly stunned that some random human could know their deepest cosmic secrets. The squad commander instantly realized something was horribly wrong because this guy held way too much forbidden knowledge. Desperately trying to maintain his cool, the leader claimed they were the sacred guardians of the youth and eternal keepers of history. He acknowledged our main character had sheltered the dragons temporarily, but aggressively insisted he trusted him 0%, heavily implying that leaving him alive was a massive risk, basically a death sentence for the whole crew. Our boy calmly suggested they talk things out, but the commander refused to listen, viciously swinging his massive greatsword downward to promise a swift execution so Jite wouldn't even feel the sting of death. But then things got absolutely unhinged. A deafening boom erupted, scattering blinding purple energy everywhere. Yet our main character did not even blink. The commander's legendary heavy greatsword was casually blocked like a literal toy, because Jite casually manifested his own SS-rank formless blade. Then crack with lightning-fast precision, our boy cleanly severed the commander's hand like slicing through soft butter. The arrogant leader crashed to the floor, howling in utter agony, while a fellow knight trashed him as a pathetic loser for getting bodied by such a basic counterattack. The remaining guardians absolutely lost their minds, roaring that they'd annihilate our main character, and ruthlessly charged with flashing swords and spears from every single direction, but they stood zero chance. Suddenly, the bleeding leader began stammering, finally grasping that this supposed mere human was an absolute monster. In the blink of an eye, elite knights were helplessly launched through the air like discarded broken toys, their impenetrable armor and legendary weapons completely shattered into dust. When the battlefield finally cleared, our main character stood effortlessly amidst the smoking wreckage, radiating pure boss energy, entirely surrounded by the crushed remains of the so-called elite guardians. The mutilated leader trembled miserably on the floor, staring up at our boy in absolute undeniable terror. Deep within his mind, he finally regretted not trusting his survival instincts sooner. No ordinary human could possess this kind of godly power, and he'd realized the terrifying truth way too late. Honestly, Jite operated on a completely different dimension, radiating the aura of an absolute monster. Our boy just glared downward, his pitch-black eyes practically piercing straight through the man's soul. He stepped forward, and the air grew heavy. Coldly, he reminded the trembling knight who exactly had begged for this conversation in the first place. Shaking like a leaf, the commander stuttered out a question, asking if Jite had conquered this realm. But the main character ruthlessly cut him off, demanding straight answers instead. How on earth did his armored squad manage to bypass those broken dimensional barriers and crash into this exact timeline? The broken commander finally folded and admitted that a massive space-time distortion had occurred when their lord attempted to rip open a portal straight from the dragon's nest, but the spell violently backfired, scattering their entire unit randomly across this foreign world. Jite narrowed his eyes, demanding specifics about this cosmic glitch. The battered warrior said he lacked the exact magical blueprints, but he vividly recalled his master whispering a legendary name, the Horizon of Providence. He claimed the spatial tear was merely collateral damage from that horizon's overwhelming aura, which had violently warped the fabric of reality itself. This revelation hit Jite hard across countless brutal regressions. That godly title had never once crossed his radar, and alarm bells instantly started ringing in his head. This timeline was throwing massive unexpected curveballs at him. He suddenly realized no guardian had ever brought up this mysterious horizon before. Had that divine force literally dragged them to these exact coordinates? The warrior nodded weakly, explaining that an invisible will from beyond the horizon had hijacked their failing warp. Jisida's focus locked on completely. The commander described feeling a supernatural tug yank his soul straight through the cosmic chaos, feeding him the exact coordinates of the hatchlings directly. But Jisida wasn't buying this convenient destiny excuse, and resolved to extract the raw truth himself. He violently gripped the commander's metal helm and ordered a mandatory reality check, forcing terrified eye contact. Instantly, Jisidas activated his double S-rank Eyes of Balance, a completely broken, overpowered skill he'd ripped straight from the corpse of a slaughtered demon archduke. Those glowing irises shattered any illusion or deception, and to his absolute shock, the trembling warrior really was speaking pure facts. Flashbacks hit him hard, decades spent ruthlessly exterminating every single microscopic variable, bleeding himself dry just to keep timeline-breaking anomalies like this one buried forever. Yet here stood another massive, unscripted glitch, and it was absolutely frying his brain. Pure, unadulterated rage boiled inside Jisida. Seriously, what garbage was this? Why did these off-script elements keep respawning despite his flawless grind? Refusing to back down, he fiercely interrogated the soldier about the sinister entity lurking beyond the barrier. Choking on fear, the knight described a suffocating toxic malice, like an ancient festering grudge. It felt purely like a catastrophic curse, and he theorized it had locked onto Jisida solely because his soul was tainted by the lingering chaotic residue of the green dragon's magic. Without warning, Jisida's patience violently shattered. He delivered a devastating lightning-fast strike from the blind spot, launching the armored commander backward and leaving him coughing up blood in the dirt. While the victim writhed, Jite forcefully tore away his breastplate, exposing a bizarre anomaly, an eerie, pulsating glow bleeding from the shattered metal. In that exact microsecond, the vintage clock's absolute authority self-activated, aggressively scanning for whatever cancer was corrupting the time stream. Brilliant, divine chains of pure gold violently lashed around the intruder, radiating terrifying, suffocating pressure. Those chains compressed into a blinding sphere of judgment, broadcasting a supreme universal decree of hostility against rogue foreign variables, polluting the sacred timeline. Then, projecting absolute mechanical zero-degree frostiness, the eternal clock decreed that, effective immediately, any alien entity invading from alternate dimensions or manipulating unauthorized, splintered temporal branches would face extreme lethal prejudice. They were now officially branded as target practice. Jite stared intensely at the radiant supernatural hourglass manifesting in his palm. It suddenly hit him that this cosmic relic, his ultimate reset button for conquering death itself, was literally developing a mind of its own. Across countless grueling lifetimes, this EX-tier skill had only ever triggered during a regression, yet here it was, going completely rogue and overriding his commands. Powerless to cancel the spell, he simply braced for impact. As the golden temporal gears vanished, the surviving soldiers patched up their wounds, exchanging terrified, panic-stricken mutters, questioning out loud what kind of god-tier phenomenon had just gone down. But Jite kept his killing intent dialed all the way up. Pivoting sharply, he readied his blade and coldly demanded to know their next move. He flatly told them the legendary hatchlings were already under his absolute protection, which made their entire rescue mission utterly pointless. He also logically deduced that their magical soul tethers to the beasts had totally snapped, completely severed by the chaotic cosmic warp. It was just gone. So realistically, sticking around meant guaranteed death for zero payout. The armored squad stared back, absolutely paralyzed with shock, wondering out loud if this ruthless monster was genuinely offering them a free pass. But Jite's aura stayed ice cold. He said he didn't care either way, as long as they stayed strictly out of his crosshairs. Swallowing their pride, the bruised warriors nodded and quietly retreated into the shadows, one by one. But out of nowhere, the heavily battered commander forced himself upright, swaying violently on shattered legs, and rasped that retreating wasn't an option for him, instantly freezing the entire battlefield. Genuinely caught off guard, Jite demanded a reason. The bleeding commander confessed his absolute sworn duty was securing the dragons, and before he could even finish preaching about causality and fate, Jite had already decked him, slamming his face straight into the dirt. Zero hesitation. He planted his boot firmly on the man's armored chest, demanding to know if this guy was seriously planning on staying. Despite his ribs probably screaming in pure agony, the battered warrior refused to back down. So Jite leaned in, crushing his full weight onto the struggling knight's broken defense. Over the sound of agonizing screams, his voice dropped to a terrifying chill as he asked if the man was truly ready to die here. Gasping for breath, the knight held his ground, fierce resolve burning behind his glowing eyes beneath that heavy metal helmet, as he swore he would never abandon the dragons. Hearing this, our boy coldly shifted his gaze toward the trembling backup squad. One extra frantically yelled that their commander was totally clueless, while another mocked him for being a meathead who rejected a free escape ticket. Then those cowards literally just shrugged and bailed on their own boss. Jite stood in dead silence, processing this absolute circus. Letting out a heavy sigh, he finally decided to play along. Glaring down at the battered warrior bleeding in the dirt, he casually muttered that, honestly, true guardians needed that exact level of stubbornness. Then, in one breathtaking blur of motion, he slaughtered the deserters, sparing only this loyal meathead. Trembling in absolute shock, the commander stuttered, asking if this was all some kind of test. Jite shot that theory down instantly. With chilling composure, he admitted this guy was built completely different from those fakes, and demanded to know why he was so obsessed with the green dragon. Kneeling proudly in his full battle gear, the warrior declared his eternal devotion to her clan. Jite respected the vibe but brutally crushed his dreams by stating he was infinitely more powerful. Seriously, what could this weakling even protect? But then a rare, terrifying smirk crossed his face as he offered the guy a spot on his side. Scene transition. We pan to the living room where Uriam, Gyal, and Ugail are chilling. Jite ordered his new pet to introduce himself and announced the fierce warrior as their new housekeeper, leaving the guy utterly paralyzed, rocking heavy steel battle armor slapped together with a neon pink frilly apron. Bro, the disrespect was unreal. Imagine being a legendary commander reduced to a literal cleaning slave. Fast forward and our badass warrior is stuck at the sink, scrubbing plates in hot pink rubber gloves, sighing as his dignity shattered into dust. He flashed back to his furious protest, screaming about how scrubbing pots had literally zero connection to defending mighty dragons. Grumbling under his breath, he felt completely played, wondering if this whole setup was one massive troll. But Judah just iced him out, flexing that dragon security was already flawless, and this humiliating gig was his only ticket to stay. Then Jite flashed a glare so demonic it could freeze hell, promising to erase his entire existence if he failed at basic cure duty. Talk about toxic management. Defeated, the fallen knight aggressively scrubbed the dirty bowls, radiating pure depression, wondering how his supreme battlefield commander had devolved into the universe's most pathetic dishwasher. Suddenly, Ubom glided into the kitchen, rocking oversized pajamas, softly asking if he was the proud warrior from Ascalippa. The commander instantly panicked, dropping his tough guy act, frantically checking on her health and accidentally blurting out Lady Green before biting his tongue. Flashing an angelic smile, she brushed it off. Desperate to know why she'd left her bed, he listened as she teased him about his new job, complimenting his ridiculous apron. She sent the massive warrior into a complete internal meltdown. Radiating pure wholesome energy, she politely asked him to watch over them as their official Mr. Housekeeper. That title struck his soul like lightning. Fired up with sudden passion, he literally shattered a ceramic plate, swearing a blood oath that her precious hands would never suffer tap water again. He was officially locked in for duty. Unfazed, Ubom stared at the scattered porcelain shards and coldly reminded him that those dishes cost a literal fortune. Bro, worst first day ever. Fast forward to morning, and baby Ugatbiel initiated a full-blown runway fashion show. First, an adorable blue teddy onesie. Next, she styled a crisp academy uniform paired with a flashy neon yellow backpack, before switching to maximum goth mode in a dark aesthetic dress. Meanwhile, Ugail acted like a crazy paparazzi, spamming pictures on her smartwatch, literally vibrating with hype because little Gaiwul was serving absolute peak cuteness. Mid-fangirl breakdown, she desperately asked Ubom how she'd secured such premium drip for the kid. Smug as hell, Ubom bragged that she'd gone online shopping the second her fever broke. Pivoting her attention to the tiny fashionista, she asked if the wardrobe upgrade was approved. Gaiwul squeezed her stuffed blue bear like her life depended on it, swaying nervously while holding back a massive heart-melting smile. Everyone in the room knew this tiny dragon was completely addicted to her new clothes, despite playing the shy card. Out of nowhere, Giorl spun around and targeted their legendary dishwasher, the Mighty Knight Commander, demanding his verdict on the ultimate outfit. Sweating bullets to avoid offending anyone, the massive warrior declared her flawless in every single look. Giorl's eyes sparkled with amusement as she teased him about suddenly getting that silver tongue, a massive level up from yesterday's window washer. Meanwhile, Jite lingered in the shadows, his piercing gaze analyzing their every move. Out of nowhere, our boy shattered the mood by exposing Giorgio's secret. Her lingering finger injury was from all that string strumming. Panic flashed across her face. She immediately threw up her defenses, stammering that it was just a casual hobby, but the nervous sweat betrayed her completely. Ubom, gently brushing Giorl's hair like a loving sister, immediately scolded Jite's bluntness, gently countering that she simply adores the melody. Jite defended his blunt observation, swearing there was zero malice behind it. Then he pivoted the interrogation, demanding to know where Urim was, already suspecting she was binge-watching shows in her cave. The former knight-turned-janitor flinched. Sweating nervously, he confessed he'd tried to purify her domain earlier that morning, but suffered a brutal rejection. Voice trembling, he described her ghostly pale aura before she ruthlessly banished him. Eurobomb flashed a knowing, slightly mischievous smile, humming that it was probably another all-nighter. Our boy stayed completely silent, but the icy aura radiating off him screamed pure disappointment. Taking charge, he cracked open her door, and man, pure apocalyptic chaos greeted him. A thick fog choked the room, masking a massive graveyard of cigarette butts. Empty energy cans littered the battlefield. Amidst the ruins, Eurobomb slouched in baggy sweats, looking absolutely wrecked while clutching a beverage and aggressively tearing into some dried squid. Sparing him a sideways glare, she sneered that she was just checking if she still had a pulse. Ajite's gaze shifted to the massive monitor dominating the wall, and he asked if this was her entire existence now. She blankly nodded. He pressed her, asking if there was really nothing else, and she deadpanned that there wasn't. Suddenly, the screen exploded with a chaotic clash of heavily armored knights. Instantly, Uriam erupted, screaming loud enough to shatter glass as she ruthlessly trashed Season 7's garbage storyline, calling the sword technique pure trash. Unfazed, Jite simply suggested turning it off. She instantly fired back pure venom, sarcastically praising his groundbreaking absolute genius logic. But Jite's expression stayed stone cold, and he issued a non-negotiable command that they needed to talk. His icy tone completely stunned her. Before anyone realized it, Jite had summoned the entire household. With little Gael resting safely on his lap, he dropped the ultimate decree. Operation Total Purification was starting that instant. The three non-human girls and the terrified knight nervously lined up along the sofa, looking like prisoners awaiting execution. Yorgel shattered the silence first, frantically questioning this sudden terrifying obsession with extreme hygiene. Jite unleashed his harsh reality check, telling them straight up that even if they weren't human, they still had to adapt to human standards while on Earth. He mercilessly targeted Yoriam and Yugeyul's biohazard zones. Yugeyul completely lost her mind, shrieking, asking when he'd infiltrated her sanctuary, and snapping that you never invade another dragon's nest uninvited. Yugeyul bomb flashed a wicked smirk, teasing that didn't their mother also command her to maintain her territory before settling down. Yugeyul's face flushed crimson as she frantically screamed objections, but our boy remained utterly unfazed. Channeling a ruthless military commander, he barked out orders. The knight claimed the common areas while the girls faced their own disastrous realms. Uriam unleashed a demonic wall-shaking groan, bitterly complaining about why they should exert themselves when the servant existed for exactly this purpose. Embracing her inner menace, Uriam smeared a huge disgusting booger across Yugeyul's cheek, mocking it as a custom-made blessing of grime just for her. Murderous intent flashed in Yugeyul's eyes. Screaming like she'd absorbed a toxic attack, she violently leaped back, declaring absolute hatred for all things unclean. Uriam cackled like a villain, brutally pointing out the absolute irony of a neat freak living inside a literal garbage dump. Honestly valid point. Quickly losing interest, Uriam attempted a stealthy retreat, shamelessly commanding the knight to purify her chaotic domain, effortlessly lying that she needed physical training. The traumatized janitor actually nodded along, radiating pure defeated puppy energy. U-Bomb smoothly activated her own escape route, claiming her territory was already spotless before announcing an urgent dinner grocery run. This abandoned poor Yugeyul on the battlefield. Weeping dramatically, she cursed their expanding household and her suddenly skyrocketing workload. Our boy silently approved of U-Bomb's exit, but the moment she mentioned cooking, Jite's stoic mask completely shattered. Traumatic flashbacks hit hard. He remembered her unholy fusion of fish and purple rice, a literal culinary catastrophe. Sweating bullets, he stared at her innocent smile as she chirped sweetly, asking if he was craving anything specific. Defeated, our boy surrendered to fate, secretly praying his stomach would survive another one of her meals. Smash cut to Uriam's disaster zone, an absolute biohazard wasteland. The terrified knight stood paralyzed, knuckles turning white around his broomstick, his warrior soul practically ascending from pure trauma. Honestly, the brutal demon realm felt like a luxury resort compared to this toxic wasteland. The mystery of her zombie-like state was totally solved. Scanning the wreckage, his eyes locked onto a flower pot completely devoid of nature. Instead, it overflowed with toxic ash. He genuinely wondered if she was attempting some kind of slow, self-inflicted poisoning routine. Shaking his head, he initiated the purification protocol. Armed with a heavy-duty bag, he aggressively chucked out the metallic ruins. Suddenly something shifted, and Jite's terrifying clone materialized in full police gear, freezing the knight with a brutal death glare. The shadow copy aggressively tapped the tin can, launching into an intense, full-blown lecture about separating metals from plastics. He brutally roasted the armored knight, claiming that even back in his homeland of Ascalepa, society must be totally primitive to ignore basic recycling. The exhausted janitor just stared at this fake Jite, completely drained. But then a chilling realization struck the poor cleaner. A suffocating demonic pressure flooded the room, radiating off the figure standing nearby. This wasn't the real Jitai. It was merely a phantom, yet its overwhelming presence could easily fool absolutely anyone into thinking it was the actual boss. Piercing the cleaner with a death glare, the clone barked, demanding to know why he was just spacing out like a statue. Trembling like a leaf, the janitor furiously bowed and begged for forgiveness. Despite the terrifying aura, he secretly despised this arrogant counterfeit acting tough. Suddenly the door swung open, revealing the true Jite, who caught his shadowy double red-handed absolutely bullying the helpless cleaner. Caught off guard, the phantom shifted awkwardly, but desperately tried to play it cool, claiming he was merely educating the useless, slacking janitor on basic competence. This fake had absolutely zero chill. However, the real Jite swiftly ordered his double to shut up and start scrubbing, explaining that summoning backup had been necessary since tackling the apocalyptic disaster inside Uriam's bedroom was impossible for one person. Forced teamwork had officially begun. Hearing this glorious command, the miserable janitor felt a wave of absolute salvation, gleefully celebrating seeing this arrogant brat dragged into the same hellish chore. Thus, the ultimate deep cleaning crusade officially commenced. While the others lived their best lives, Uriam training, U-bomb grocery shopping, and the two youngest girls happily playing around, the tragic duo battled an absolute mountain of garbage. They scrubbed and sweated relentlessly until the sun finally dipped below the horizon. Exhausted, the Phantom reported to Jite's desk, proudly declaring the impossible mission accomplished. Surprisingly, the main character actually offered genuine praise, remarking that absolute miracles really do exist. He then spun his monitor around, revealing a glowing red target hovering over Moscow, Russia. He revealed that a shady organization named Invisibility was operating there, conducting twisted, horrific experiments on transcendent class magic users. Gruesome images of massive test tubes and mutated humans flashed on screen. Jite issued a cold command, finished local patrol duties, then instantly deployed to Russia to hunt down the target called Prototype X. Without a single ounce of hesitation, the clone pledged absolute obedience. Just as the briefing concluded, the front door burst open, revealing U-Bomb with a breathtaking smile, announcing her return. The exhausted janitor politely welcomed her back, while Yu-Gail stared at the mountainous bags of groceries in pure shock, questioning the massive haul. U-Bomb just beamed cheerfully, explaining that their expanding family naturally required a much larger feast. The Phantom attempted a stealthy escape, but Jite clamped a heavy hand onto its shoulder, his eyes flashing with lethal intent as he commanded an immediate wardrobe swap, silencing any protests. Cut to the dining room, where U-Bomb enthusiastically rallied everyone to dig in, revealing an absolute culinary nightmare. Toxic purple soup bubbled violently, exhaling sinister smoke while whole fish jutted out like jagged spears. Surprisingly, the girls devoured it. Yu-Gail gasped in amazement, declaring the cursed flavor perfectly matched their traditional Askalepa cuisine. Uriam casually agreed it tasted decent. Yu-Gail innocently wished the cleaner could join the feast, but Uriam brutally called her clueless, reminding her the armored guy literally lacked a mouth. Meanwhile, the trapped shadow clone sat frozen in casual wear, sweating absolute buckets while staring down the demonic stew. The horrific realization finally struck him. His master had ruthlessly swapped places, strictly to dodge this catastrophic dinner. What a brutal betrayal for the clone. So where was the actual Jite hiding? He stood looking incredibly sharp, peacefully basking in the moonlit darkness, having successfully dodged a lethal bullet and abandoned his tragic double to endure U-Bomb's apocalyptic cooking. Now that is absolutely ruthless. The very next day, inside an abandoned rotting factory near Lair, our boy was dealing absolute devastation. It was pure carnage. Shattered bodies littered the blood-soaked concrete, accompanied only by the agonizing, ear-piercing shrieks of a broken demon. The blood-drenched monster spiraled into total madness, screeching that U-Bomb would suffer eternal torment, desperately screaming about his powerful, untouchable hidden backers. U-Bomb just stared down, cold and emotionless like a grim reaper. Then, without even a single blink, he cleanly severed the monster's hands, sending him crashing face-first into the unforgiving concrete like a discarded, lifeless rag doll. Absolutely brutal. He casually grabbed the screaming demon by the scalp, whispering with bone-chilling calmness that he already knew the identity of this so-called mighty sponsor. He named him directly Weiyuan, the elite Blue Dragon Professor, known throughout the underworld as the sinister mastermind of the Invisibility Syndicate. With absolute zero hesitation, he plunged his merciless blade straight through the creature's throat, demanding the raw truth about Weiyuan's ultimate twisted master plan. He instantly triggered his absolutely broken eyes of balance ability, silently warning the vile fiend that deception was utterly useless today. He demanded absolute honesty, zero tricks. Terror morphed the monster's face into pure, unadulterated panic. Trembling violently, the creature confessed he lacked the full picture, yet he still dropped a massive bombshell. Weiyuan swore that if their scheme succeeded in 3 months, he would secure a coveted position called a seat. This title was legendary, a supreme throne reserved strictly for the Invisible Syndicate's top 4 commanders, and it was said to grant a personal legion and apocalyptic strength. Our boy found this incredibly suspicious, because throughout his countless previous regressions, that traitor Weiyuan never even sniffed a throne, and he absolutely lacked the sheer authority to pull off this massive stunt today. Suddenly, his mystical anti-clock ability violently surged to life once more. A suffocating, malicious aura bled through from a dimension far beyond ordinary human comprehension. The artifact hunted down whoever dared to shatter Destiny's rules. It viciously locked onto a single target, the monstrous Weiyuan. The system violently flashed a massive red alert, exposing an intruder manipulating the sacred timeline, and the system completely despised his temporal regression cycle. Unbelievably, Weiyuan had shattered the endless loop, mutating into a catastrophic glitch within reality, retaining his absolute peak abilities from every previous existence. That is not just cheating, that is straight-up God-tier system manipulation. Jite immediately sensed the lethal stakes. First those fanatic guardians, and now this overpowered Wiwan anomaly. The cosmos desperately wanted him dead. Meanwhile, the pathetic creature groveled on the bloody dirt, frantically pleading for mercy, saying he had emptied his mind. He practically begged our boy for a second chance, promising to dig up darker secrets, even fabricating a tragic tale about his bedridden mother. Naturally, our boy, cold-blooded as ever, saw right through the pathetic illusion. He ruthlessly summoned a brutal lightning bolt, decapitating the fiend instantly. He glared at the headless remains with terrifying radiant eyes, recalled his exact promise that deceit guaranteed death. He smoothly activated his devastating incineration technique, reducing the filthy carcass to absolute dust, coldly noting that even total honesty would never have saved the monster's miserable life. Fate is genuinely cruel. Afterward, he silently marched back toward the sprawling city, deeply processing these grim new revelations. He calculated that Waiwan's colossal ambition absolutely had to intertwine with the lair. He vividly recalled how that bastard pushed for Urium to become the student representative at the Grand Winter Banquet. The sinister puzzle pieces rapidly clicked into place. That entire ceremony screamed deadly trap. Suddenly his sharp gaze caught Ubom and Gale chilling peacefully in the distant courtyard. Two random students blocked their path, absolutely squealing over Gale and praising her overwhelming cuteness. One excitedly asked for the tiny girl's name, and Ubom, wearing her signature gentle smile, told them it was Gale. The strangers practically melted over the precious name, saying it perfectly suited her icy hair before asking her age. But abruptly they sensed Jite looming behind them, radiating an absolutely suffocating murderous aura, as he coldly asked whether these strangers needed anything from the child. Experiencing our boy's bone-chilling intimidation firsthand, they absolutely panicked and bolted like they had just encountered a grim reaper. Jite calmly claimed the empty bench space beside Ubom. She curiously asked about his all-day disappearance, but he simply locked his gaze forward, muttering about unresolved business. She kept rambling, expressing deep regret over missing quality time with Gil due to battling a sudden fever all morning, while gesturing toward Gil playing near the splashing fountain. She heavily sighed, realizing tomorrow's academy opening meant their carefree adventures were officially over. Then she flashed a brilliant smirk, asking Jitai if they finally resembled a legitimate family. She playfully assigned titles, declaring Gil the precious daughter, herself the devoted mother, which obviously crowned Jitai as the stoic father. She threw him a bashful, intensely romantic side glance. Yet our boy delivered his legendary emotionless glare. Ubom burst into sweet laughter, claiming it was merely a prank, while wondering why he remained perpetually rigid. Our boy bluntly told her that if she planned to spout sheer nonsense, she belonged back home. Ubom merely smiled in silence, admiring him scoop up Gil, and softly thought to herself that playing pretend was genuinely thrilling. The following dawn brought explosive energy as cadets flooded toward the elite academy beneath a radiant, cloudless sky. Yugai Jewel dashed frantically with crispy toast dangling from her lips, absolutely embodying total main character anime energy. Squealing with pure joy about her highly anticipated first day, Ubom effortlessly matched her chaotic pace, curiously asking about her chosen schedule and praying their paths would align. Suddenly, Ubom pointed out the dramatic bread prop, noting that Yugai Jewel had totally devoured a massive breakfast earlier. Yugai Jewel giggled mischievously, claiming her oblivious friend lacked vision. Urban legend dictated that sprinting toward campus, chomping on morning baked goods and violently colliding at a blind corner practically guaranteed encountering your soulmate. Deep within her vivid imagination, she literally envisioned slamming into an outrageously gorgeous dragon prince. This girl was completely lost in her romantic delusions. But honestly, dreaming big never hurts. Thomas critique after the dreaming Nico Stekupinadi Kainchichiro Audio, who anchored herself there sporting a wickedly arrogant smirk. She leaned incredibly close, dangerously murmuring about their perfectly timed fateful encounter. This absolutely shattered Yugai Jewel's reality. Yugai Jewel, flashing her signature menacing smile, teased that fate had bound them as soulmates. Our anxious blonde almost screeched, frantically pointing out their matching genders, but Yugai Jewel merely cackled, insisting Western shows prove that did not matter at all. Bruh, this fiery menace gave 0 out of 10 cares. With lightning speed, she swiped the crispy bread right from Yugai Jewel's trembling lips and devoured it whole. Yugai Jewel's soul visibly left her body, ultimate breakfast betrayal achieved. Shifting the vibe, Yugai Jewel casually asked where Grand Boss Jite had vanished to. Ubom softly mentioned his promise to monitor their lectures, though he detoured straight to the staff headquarters. Smirking like a true villain, Yariam loudly speculated about a secret romance, considering his suspicious overnight absence. Instant paralysis hit Yorobom. Cold sweat drenched her face as she violently stuttered out a desperate, panicky denial. Gajul stared with massive concern, innocently asking whether Yorobom had caught a fever, since she was practically melting away. Suddenly, blinding camera strobes erupted as a massive mob swarmed their position. Yoriam narrowed her fierce eyes, spotting a ravenous pack of reporters hunting for shots of the legendary rookies. Standing united, the trio braced themselves while bystanders aggressively gossiped, pointing at Yoriam as the absolute unit who crushed Sophia and dropped that unhinged exam speech. Catching sight of her iconic crimson locks, the media horde stampeded forward, desperately screaming for an exclusive interview. Dozens of mics violently invaded her personal space with overlapping interrogations. Yul simply watched the chaotic stampede, absolutely mortified and questioning their literal sanity. Yoriam's patience meter officially hit 0. The dragon was awake. She unleashed a soul-shaking beastly roar, demanding total silence, paralyzing the entire mob in pure, unadulterated terror. Piercing the reporters with a lethal glare, she branded them trash, insisting her previous statement was final, and dared anyone to challenge her, flipping an arrogant finger while flashing a terrifyingly ruthless, battle-hungry smirk. The entire crowd violently recoiled. No one possessed the death wish required to engage. Meanwhile, at base camp, Gale camped out on the floor, tightly hugging her plushie and intensely guarding the entrance, craving some entertainment. The cleaner peeked inside, instantly questioning his life choices. Jite's ominous departure warning echoed in his skull. With the students deployed and the boss absent, this mere mortal had to solo guard the terrifying baby dragon. Pure, unfiltered dread masked his expression. Scrubbing grime was nothing compared to this boss battle, and childcare was not in his skill tree. Faking maximum composure, he formally addressed Lady Gale, nervously suggesting she relax somewhere plush until the squad returned. Gale locked onto him momentarily, then brutally dismissed his existence. Emotional damage critical. The poor dude started sweating buckets. His protective gear nearly slipped from the moisture. Completely strategyless, he tactically retreated to scrub random objects, desperate to evade the suffocating aura. But gathering his scattered courage, he responded with a fresh tactic. Using his softest tone, he proposed a co-op reading session. Instantly, sparkling stars ignited within Gale's cold eyes. Finally, a successful hit. Feeling a surge of hope, he planted himself on the ground facing his tiny overlord, presenting a tome titled Dad is a Fairy. The cover featured an absolutely wholesome illustration of a winged family duo. He narrated an ancient tale of Dolsun and her father surviving deep within enchanted woods. But his warrior brain was totally glitched. Traumatized by combat, his mind projected a hellish monster wasteland instead of a mystical paradise. Continuing the lore, he explained how the father shared nightly legends while mentally visualizing gruesome, blood-soaked battlefield chronicles. He deadass concluded this innocent toddler possessed a bloodthirsty warrior spirit like himself. Witnessing this breakdown, Going stared utterly bewildered, likely registering him as a complete lunatic. Pushing forward, he read how Dolsun awoke to an empty, fatherless home. Rather than assuming a simple grocery run, this broken veteran envisioned a savage raid for a captured bride, complete prisoner of war style, imagining a highly intense tactical abduction. He blindly praised Dolsun's luck in acquiring a replacement mother, picturing the poor hostage screaming in utter agony. Bro, fairy tales do not work like that. Turning to face his audience, he instantly met Gang's terrifyingly murderous death glare. A pitch-black, suffocating aura violently erupted from the child, leaving the clueless veteran completely baffled, wondering why she disliked the plot. Obviously, my guy, you are acting like a literal psycho. Our precious Gang felt deeply traumatized. Staying entirely silent, she menacingly aimed a tiny finger toward the isolation corner, silently ordering him to get lost, and read the story to himself. The defeated warrior broke eye contact, completely lost, while she comfortably sprawled out, cheerfully humming at the colorful pages. Meanwhile, our broken hero curled into the shadow corner, his very soul ascending to heaven. Childcare was definitely his dump stat. Flashing back to the academy grounds, a dangerously sleek phantom vehicle pulled up. The chauffeur practically teleported to pop the door, and out stepped a flawless beauty radiating runway energy, totally out of place on a gritty battlefield. Enter Gong Juhee, the future supreme heir of the legendary Gong dynasty. We are talking about Korea's top 3 elite blade master bloodlines. Yet this pampered princess only obsessed over maintaining her absolute perfect complexion. She whined endlessly, aggressively applying cosmetics, while trashing their rigorous martial arts practice just because it ruined her absolute glow. Perspiration basically destroyed her flawless base layer. Mother had her priorities straight. Suddenly, she spotted a massive swarm of hungry paparazzi blocking the main gates. Instantly, her ego spiked, fully convinced this media circus gathered exclusively for her grand arrival. She practically sparkled, absolutely hyped that her celebrity status had peaked. Her absolute Chad of a lackey, a dude named Kim, desperately attempted to shatter her delusion, nervously whispering that those flashing lenses definitely targeted somebody else entirely. Juhee whipped around, glaring daggers at him like he just brutally dragged her entire bloodline, and viciously demanded he repeat himself. Sizzling with absolute rage, she desperately needed to know who else possessed enough main character energy to make paparazzi literally pitch tents outside. Ignoring his panicked stutters, she ruthlessly, aggressively shoved a random cameraman away and strutted forward, radiating pure boss energy. But what absolute madness unfolded directly in her line of sight. Yul and Uraeum literally just dropped into the scene. Even arrogant Juhee silently confessed these two queens served absolute breathtaking visuals. We are talking illegal levels of gorgeous. Then her jaw dropped at pure chaos. Uraeum literally lounged upon a random classmate, dominating him like a living throne, while he dragged humself like an ultimate simp. Nearby, Yul looked completely traumatized. desperately questioning how this absolute madness even existed. Uriam, face totally deadpan, bluntly stated this pathetic guy had begged for it. The actual human furniture literally shook like a terrified stray, violently nodding with pure joy, claiming extreme fanboy status and loving every single second. Uriam simply pierced him with absolute disgust, labeled his existence pure trash, and carried on radiating untouchable, unbothered energy. Instantly, she aggressively dominated the entire media mob, declaring a strict one-question limit per reporter, promising to vanish instantly if they crossed her boundaries. The entire chaotic swarm froze instantly, terrified to trigger her wrath. She singled out some capped reporter who immediately launched into a massive yapping session about his Taiwanese network credentials. Boom, Uriam instantly sliced through his annoying monologue, canceling his massive yapping and mercilessly skipped ahead. That rejected dude just froze, jaw glued to the pavement, zero questions successfully launched. Next up, a French correspondent asked about her current vibe regarding dominating the spotlight across the entire awakened superhuman society. Uriam, radiating zero cares, casually dug into her nostril, called the fame absolutely filthy, and swiped left. Another brave soul brought up her obsessed followers. Uriam brutally crushed her heel into her living throne, calling her entire fanbase total psycho-stalkers. Brutal. Dull. Suddenly a heavy-set spectacled reporter locked onto her. He aggressively demanded to know the hidden meaning behind her unhinged outburst during that infamous Blue Dragon Academy broadcast. She practically scanned his soul with absolute toxic repulsion, growling that his brain already understood it, while brutally roasting his atrocious body odor. Yet this creep refused to fold, heavily pressing about her extremely foul vocabulary choices. He attempted a creepy smirk, heavily hinting at some spicy hidden agenda driving her actions. Uriam slowly invaded his personal space, flashing an absolutely lethal predator grin, and darkly suggested they hook up right there. The guy basically short-circuited, visibly sweating bullets. Instantly, her expression shifted into pure ice, sneering that he obviously recognized her sarcasm, asking why he kept pushing such a pathetic narrative. Shockingly, this sleazy reporter held his ground without flinching. Flashing a wicked grin, he declared the media industry ran on absolute garbage, heavily suggesting that if she dropped the attitude, he would totally write favorably. Boom. She violently snatched his collar, growling that her sanity thread had just snapped. Panicking, Yugayo desperately attempted to defuse the ticking bomb, but nobody gave a damn. Noticing the rolling cameras, the shady reporter ruthlessly decided to escalate the danger's toxicity further. He quietly hissed threats to ruin her reputation if she remained defiant, vowing to drop a viral headline claiming she'd begged for his bed, daring her to keep barking. Bro, that was a massive fatal error. Uriam absolutely snapped, going feral, and roared a promise to violently rip him apart, launching a devastating right hook straight toward his smug skull as Yugael shrieked in absolute terror. Yet, mere milliseconds before impact, a massive palm flawlessly intercepted her blazing strike. Plot twist. Our boy entered the chat. Yugael practically collapsed in pure relief, almost screaming his holy name. Jite served an icy glare, grumbling about how these girls instantly dragged him into supreme chaos upon arrival. Uriam aggressively barked back, frantically blaming the absolute trash reporter for starting the war. Jite gave zero cares. He effortlessly hoisted her up like a lightweight duffel bag, casually tossing her over his broad shoulder. Uriam instantly unleashed a furious drum solo against his spine, screaming for immediate release, but our Sigma male brutally declared the press conference dead, freezing the room. He slowly locked onto the trembling reporter with absolute predator eyes, and coldly ordered him to permanently bury today's entire incident. His murderous aura erupted like a hurricane, pressure so violently heavy that camera lenses instantly exploded, forcing the reporter onto his knees, literally leaking puddles in absolute unadulterated horror. Even feral Uriam, dangling upside down, just stared at his godlike dominance in pure disbelief. He was not here to play games. Jite casually strolled away, hauling Uriam, telling a stunned Yugael to speed up before the bell rang. Backstage, Juhei remained completely frozen, pupils totally dilated, frantically asking her lackey if he'd witnessed that absolute cinematic insanity. Her assistant nervously suggested they investigate that wild girl's ancient bloodline immediately. However, Juhei harbored an entirely different crazy obsession brewing inside her brain. She stared at Yugael, blurting out a question about how her chest could possibly be that massive. Bro, I was utterly speechless. Even Assistant Kim just stood there, shocked by her words. Cut to the lecture hall, where Professor Kai materialized, radiating strict towering authority. He introduced himself as the Blade Master Professor, announcing the lesson today would focus on the ancient history of swordsmanship and mastering the proper mindset for the blade. Beside Jitai, Uriam groaned, rolling her eyes so violently they nearly popped. She dismissed this philosophical trash, demanding to know when the actual bloodbath would begin. Our boy was shocked she'd survived the intro, but Uriam just scoffed, claiming she always endured agonizingly slow dramas. Then her true motive slipped. She craved ultimate power, plotting to absolutely shatter that armored freak Javier herself. She interrogated Jitai about why he shadowed her here instead of babysitting Yubam or Yugael. He bluntly answered with a brutal truth she already knew deep down. He knew the fiery red dragon would unleash absolute chaos if left unsupervised. Uriam instantly played the victim, swearing she'd been a complete angel lately. Bro, not even 5 minutes ago she nearly obliterated a journalist. Naturally, our boy destroyed her lie, recalling the incident. She deflected aggressively, arguing that garbage humans started it and entirely deserved her wrath. Suddenly, she leaned heavily against Juhayan, intentionally closing their distance. He shot her his signature freezing glare, telling her to get off because she was radiating heat. Uriam smirked wickedly, teasing him. Most dudes would completely lose their minds over this. She teased if he was blushing, but he completely iced her out, remaining as unresponsive as solid granite. Uriam threw a massive tantrum, visibly insulted that her charm offensive completely failed. She slammed her head down, groaning about dying from sheer boredom. Jite coldly stated academics were never meant to entertain. She snapped back, clarifying she meant his dull personality. Uriam complained that even a hostage-taker should have some flair, expecting him to be an unhinged psycho, not a soulless brick wall. She had anticipated explosive, adrenaline-fueled adventures alongside him. Instead, she got suffocating domestic vibes. Jite dryly countered that their chaotic morning commute should suffice, but Uriam's eyes ignited with pure madness, craving brutal combat and the euphoric rush of destroying enemies. Not this academic torture. Right then, Professor Kai spotted the predatory glint in her gaze. Far from intimidated, he practically smiled. His pupils flared with an eerie, supernatural green aura, muttering he possessed the perfect remedy for her bloodlust. Before the entire class, he commanded them to remain behind. Uriam glared daggers, radiating pure murderous intent. Yikes, she was totally screwed. Flash forward, Uriam was trapped in the dusty armory, violently scrubbing wooden training blades like a ticking time bomb. Furious, she launched equipment everywhere, screaming that janitor duty was infinitely worse than a brutal beatdown. Her rage intensified with every single agonizing second. Our boy, completely unfazed, told her to stop crying and start polishing. Forever seeking shortcuts, she demanded they summon their neat freak guardian to handle this peasant labor. He deadpanned, asking who would protect their fragile Gyel then. She scowled fiercely, cursing Blue for being useless. Pivoting sharply, she asked if he was a scholar growing up. Jute stated survival left zero time for books. Uriam scoffed, labeling him a meathead using survival as a pathetic excuse. He revealed his past was an endless bloody war zone just to breathe. That grim reality instantly silenced her. Unsure if he was bluffing, she wondered what that made her, if his nightmare was real. Dropping the attitude, she sparked a cigarette, piercing him with a heavy question about whether life was fun. Jute locked eyes with hollow emptiness, explaining reality was never a joyful game. Genuinely baffled, she could not grasp surviving just to exist. She swore if she wielded his godlike strength, she would never stagnate in boredom. She teased his immense power probably just fried his brain. Looking burdened by centuries, he confessed time drags on relentlessly. Quitting was never an option. She mocked his edgy teenager depression, prompting his icy command to shut up and scrub. Bro, he was completely immune to her tantrums. Later that night, Yorkier mindlessly spun a Rubik's Cube while their guardian furiously sanitized the room like his soul depended on it. Meanwhile, Yorkier Wime and Yorkgehil vibed in the background, totally immersed in stacking their toy blocks. The guardian hovered over Yorkier Wime like a ghost, and watching her painfully struggle with that puzzle absolutely triggered her rage, screaming at him to back off and stop ruining her focus. The terrified dude immediately apologized, literally trembling like a leaf. Exhausted, she dramatically face-planted onto the sofa, radiating pure boredom while the guardian watched her pitifully. Softly, Yorkier Wime asked whether that annoying journalist drama from earlier still bothered her, but Yorkier Wime coldly brushed it off. Existence just felt insanely dull without a blood-pumping brawl. Suddenly, out of absolutely nowhere, she called Yorkier Wime Big Sister, basically giving the poor girl a massive heart attack. Yorkier Wime panicked, jumping up to ask whether she needed an ambulance, completely dumbfounded by what she had just heard. Dropping the respect, Yorkier Wime switched right back to calling her Green. She sat down, getting super philosophical, asking what truly gave her life purpose. Totally stunned, Yorkier Wime leaned over, whispering to Girl that their fiery roommate was finally hitting puberty. Yorkier Wime shrieked that she heard everything, snapping at Girl for silently agreeing with that absolute trash. She then ranted about having asked Jite what made existence fun, mocking his edgy answer that you simply endure reality because time never stops moving forward. Declaring that the gloomy dude felt zero actual joy, she passionately argued that chasing happiness was the only real point of surviving this world. Pointing at Yorkier happily munching away and Girl Wime Vijijue, and Girl vibing with her teddy bear, she proved that some people actually understood the true assignment of life. Everyone craves pure joy. Defending him, Yorkier Wime gently suggested that maybe Jite just kept his real passions completely hidden. Uriam instantly interrupted, ruthlessly roasting Yubam for being exactly like him, totally secretive, unreadable, and straight-up boring. She dared Yubam to name one thrilling thing she enjoyed. Eyes sparkling with mischief, Yubam completely dropped an atomic bomb. She confessed finding Jite unexpectedly shy. Uriam froze in pure shock before calling cap on that. branding that man a literal cold-blooded sociopath. Smiling softly, Yubom admitted feeling the exact same way initially, but now she genuinely found his hidden side incredibly cute. Shuddering, Yuriam called her sweet smile absolutely terrifying. Unable to handle the cringe, she aggressively lunged, ruthlessly tickling Bomb without mercy. As Yubom squealed, desperately thrashing to escape the attack, Yuriam loudly interrogated whether those two were secretly dating. Meanwhile, Yubom just silently judged them. Clutching her plushie, she deeply questioned why these ancient dragons acted so incredibly childish. Honestly, this chaotic crew definitely mastered their own bizarrely unique version of family bonding. Suddenly, Yubom rocketed up the stairs like a meteor, screaming that the entire lair community was completely obsessing over Yuriam. A whole fan club just dropped for her, but catching those two dragons in a super sus position, she instantly blushed red and nervously apologized for interrupting. Yuriam frantically screamed that it was a massive misunderstanding. Fast forward to morning, our boy strapped on his shirt, radiating his usual unbothered aura. Good lord, his physique is absolutely god tier. We all know he is flawlessly majestic. Anyway, the front door violently swung open. Then a sweet voice called his name as Yubom peeked inside. She looked a little hesitant before admitting she had a favor to ask, but her eyes landed on his 8-pack, and she got flustered, apologizing until Jite waved her in. Once he was dressed, Yubom entered, looking sharp in her uniform, and approached him. In a super timid voice, she asked if he'd accompany her today. It was clear she'd summoned all her courage for this. Pouting, she reminded him he always hung out with Yujin well, but had never once gone out with her. She even began to scold him, her puppy dog eyes turned up to the max. Our boy tried to reason with her, recalling Yujin insane violence and Yugewell's endless begging for food whenever they were together. Just thinking about it was exhausting, so he prepared to refuse Yubom. But then Yujin and Yugewell appeared. Yugewell asked why Yubom wasn't heading to school yet, while Yujin insisted she finish her breakfast first. That's when Yubom dropped the bombshell, announcing she was asking their master on a date. Yugewell looked absolutely floored. Yuriam, ever the pragmatist, figured Yubom just needed a guardian. Yugeyu, taking it seriously, asked Jite why he'd never gone out with Yubom, pointing out that it looked like he favored her in Yuriam. Our boy immediately denied it, but Yugeyu, munching on toast, just giggled, saying favoritism is wrong, but she understood. She brought up her mom, who'd met countless men daily and favors a few. Yuriam was genuinely impressed, calling her mom incredible. I think our sunshine is too innocent to know what's happening. Anyways, Yubom, however, seemed lost in her thoughts, wondering if the men her mom left felt how she was feeling now. When Jite asked what she meant, Yubom snapped, saying he'd kidnapped her, only to treat her like she was nothing, like a fisherman ignoring his catch. Her expression was a mix of sadness and deep loneliness. Yuriam then cut in, saying she understood why he watched over them since trouble was their shadow, but she promised to behave this one time and pleaded with him to go with Yubom. She reminded him that he couldn't just babysit them forever. Our boy considered it and finally caved. The moment he agreed, Yubom beamed and shot Jite a triumphant wink. She's definitely got a crush on him. Later at the academy, they stood in a massive ornate hall buzzing with students. Nearby, staff murmured about Yubom's beauty and her perfect interview score. They started gossiping about her family until one guy mocked the Yu family name as low class. Seriously, what a clown. Our boy sat right behind them, hearing every single word. As class ended, the teacher announced the beginning of social dance training. A collective groan filled the room. The instructor teased their shyness, reminding them this was necessary since they'd have to attend high society events. She said the real shame would be not knowing how to act in a formal setting. With that, she instructed them all to find a partner. Suddenly, an awkward tension filled the air as students scrambled to pair up while trying to look cool. But here's the strange part. People were stunned that Yubom had no partner, thinking every guy would be rushing to her. Instead, she stood alone as if an invisible barrier surrounded her. Students whispered that she was just too intimidating, like even approaching her was a daunting task. The professor finally noticed Yubom was still by herself. Yubom nervously confessed she wasn't very popular. The professor kindly offered to be her partner, commenting on how lovely she was. But Yubom did something that shocked everyone. She asked if her guardian could dance with her instead. The stunned professor could only agree. And then Yubom practically teleported to Jite's side. She held out her hand, all but yanking him onto the dance floor. He looked slightly irritated, admitting he was terrible at dancing. Yubom just gave him this huge pleading look, begging him not to abandon her. Our boy was trapped. He just sighed in resignation as the lesson began. The professor told them to hold hands and feel the rhythm. As Jite faced Yubom, she shyly looked away, but he was the one who was visibly trembling. She noticed his awkwardness and asked if her touch made him uncomfortable. He denied it with his usual cold demeanor, but when Yubom grabbed his hand firmly, it completely rattled him. She clarified that holding hands didn't mean they were in love or anything, and he coolly replied that he understood. But then her expression turned serious as she warned him not to screw up and ruin her grade. Now that was a real threat. As they began to dance, their movements flowed surprisingly well. Yubom mused to herself that his palms were sweating like crazy, and not just his hands but his back and chest too. She had no idea what was making him so tense. Just then, an image of his toned muscles under the fabric flashed in her mind, and her cheeks went completely scarlet. Losing her composure, she stumbled, but our boy caught her just in time. Their faces were suddenly inches apart when a trickle of blood ran from Yubom's nose. Bro, the tension. Just kiss already. A moment later, they were outside. Yubom sipped her juice with a tissue in her nose, as Jite asked if she needed a hospital, his voice laced with concern. Yubom, bewildered, insisted she was fine and hadn't hit a thing, but for real, it felt odd. What caused the nosebleed? Yubom dodged his gaze, claiming ignorance. She then switched subjects, pointing out that his dancing was far better than she'd imagined. Her eyes narrowed as she asked whether he had learned to dance before. A memory flashed in his mind, dancing flawlessly with another woman at night, promising he would perfect his steps for her. He snapped back to reality and lied to Yubom, denying he'd ever learned. Yubom eyed him with pure suspicion, sipping her juice. She then asked about his after-school plans. Hearing none, she tied up her hair, a fire igniting in her eyes as she told him to join her for some fun. Meanwhile, in Moscow, Russia, things were anything but calm. Inside a sinister demon lab run by the Invisibility Syndicate, alarms blared as the facility descended into panic. Scientists scrambled for their lives, some slipping in pools of blood. One screamed that their operation had gone to hell. Total anarchy. One female researcher with a clear demonic aura sprinted down the corridors, desperate to escape. Panic seized her. What kind of monster had just appeared and unleashed this utter destruction? She reached a door, but the lock held fast. She wasn't foolish. She knew there was no way their pathetic security could stop this threat. She reached for her comms, but before she could call for backup, boom, a shadow materialized behind her. Jite, cold and menacing in all black, asked where she was off to in such a rush. The woman froze in terror, shaking, trapped between a predator and a dead end. She stammered, asking what he could possibly want from her. Jite's eyes flared with an ominous blue light. Yeah, it was about to go down. He cut straight to the point, asking if her boss was seeking something of his particular interest, a demonic weapon known as Prototype X. The woman refused, her panic escalating, screaming she would die before betraying them. Our boy wasted no time. A shadowy hand shot out, seizing her throat as darkness coiled around her. He remarked coldly that all demons reveal their true nature right before death. His gaze was piercing as he thought about how when the pain truly sets in, these creatures drop their human facade and become little more than broken dolls. A pathetic sight. He lifted her effortlessly, telling her with chilling sarcasm to go dance alone in the moonlight. Absolutely savage. With the demon slain, our boy stood over the corpse, blood dripping from his fingertips. Then, he called out to his master, and there he was, the Shadow Agent, looking completely solid and real. The Shadow reported to Jite that Prototype X was already at the leader's main headquarters, complicating things since the new prototype is a girl, unlike in the previous timeline. Jite commanded the Shadow to assume the dead researcher's form and infiltrate Invisibility's primary base to learn Prototype X's true nature. The Shadow loyally accepted, preparing to go deep undercover. The scene snaps back to our boy, waiting inside a clothing shop. This Prototype X is a demonic human hybrid formed by fusing numerous demons and possessing the strongest human it consumes. The longer this creature survives, the more humans it absorbs, evolving into an ever-growing threat. That's why our boy always eliminates Prototype X first in every regression. But this time, the intel is different from the last timeline, making the search a nightmare. Even the vintage clock confirmed that some malevolent force had tampered with the world's timeline. But it didn't matter. He would destroy X no matter what, and let nothing disturb his daily life.